The handouts or review materials must be treated with utmost confidentiality. It shall be the responsibility of the person whose name appears therein that the handouts or review materials are not photocopied or in any way reproduced, shared, or lent to any person or disposed in any manner. Any handouts or review materials found in the possession of another person whose name does not appear therein shall be prima facie evidence of violation of RA 8293. Top-notch review materials are updated every 6 months based on the current trends and feedback. Please buy all recommended review books and other materials.
The next discussion is on lipids. But before we proceed, how are you doing so far? Kaya pa ba? You know, you have to acknowledge that you are at a very difficult time in your career, no? So in your life, no? Taking the board exam is really a daunting experience for most of us, if not everyone. So every day you doubt yourself whether you can actually do this, even though you feel that you already are doing the best that you can, no? So parang feeling mo binibigay mo na lahat, pero bakit parang kulang pa rin? And for me, I think the most difficult part of reviewing for the board exam, no, when I took it many years ago, was how every day was a constant repetition of the previous day, no? So parang paulit-ulit lang, no? It's the routine that actually kills you, no? It's the routine that kills you. What do I mean, no? So ibig sabihin, pagising mo sa umaga, maybe gigising ka 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and then you'll have breakfast or coffee, and then makikinig ka na ng lectures, no? Magbabasa ka na agad. And then, pagdating ng mga 10, 11, or 12, magla-lunch ka na, no? Tatawagin ka ng nanay mo or tatay mo, kakain ka na. Pagkakain mo, basa na ulit, no? So, or maybe, maliligo ka sa hapon, no? Or kung sa umaga, no? Pagkatapos mo maligo, basa ka na naman ulit. Pagdating ng mga 3 or 4 o'clock, you open your phone, YouTube, or you open your TV, manonood ka ng konti, tapos magi-guilty, and then magbabasa ka na naman ulit. And then it's time for dinner. After dinner, basa na naman ulit. Okay? Until you fall asleep. The next day, everything starts all over. No? So paulit. No? So at the start, medyo exciting pa, bago pa yung highlighter, bago pa yung mga handouts, bago pa yung mga videos. You feel very confident that you feel confident you can probably do this, but as the days go on, no, that confidence wanes, no, and the doubts get bigger. So how do you survive that? How do you actually get through several weeks, several months of this? I think it is very important, no, to put things in perspective. So the bad news is the best time to prepare for the boards was actually your first 5 years in medical school. You didn't know it then, no? But actually, those 5 years, that's your best preparation for the board exam. So try to reflect, no, on the last 5 years. Paano ka ba nag-aaral, no? Paano ka ba pumapasa sa exam? Ano ba yung mga strategies na nag-work for you? And I'm sure you realize that the strategies you used in high school or pre-med didn't work most of the time. The best part naman of medical school is that during the first 2 years, you were just memorizing, but then when you started seeing patients, all of a sudden, all of these made sense. No? So try to reflect. No? As I've said, remember the long exams that you take, the comprehensive exams. No? What helped you study under pressure? And you use those strategies that worked for you. Don't now. This is probably not the best time to try a new strategy, no? So siguro just reflect, no. So paano ka ba nag-aaral noon? No, And then take it one day at a time, no. You know. Okay lang naman na okay lang mapagod, no? Okay lang mapagod kasi lahat naman tayo napapagod. So meaning to say, okay lang mapagod, pahinga ka lang ulit, no? Or tulog ka, no? Kunyari, no? So what you do, You give yourself time limits, no? So, kunyari, 8 o'clock, mag-start ka mag-aral, no? Tapos 10 o'clock, nagbe-breakdown ka na. 10 o'clock, nagbe-break ka na. So okay lang mag-breakdown. Basta give yourself a time limit. Set mo yung timer sa phone mo. Okay, 15 minutes. Mag-breakdown ako for 15 minutes. So stop, pause, take your mind off things, and then go back. And then go back. That's the important thing. No? The important thing is that you don't give up. No? You only lose when you don't restart again. No? You only lose when you restart again. And then you have to remember, bakit mo ba ginagawa to? Why are you doing this in the first place? Bakit mo ba pinipilit yung sarili mo na bumangon sa umaga? No, bakit mo ba pinipilit yung sarili mo na mag-memorize ng sangkatutak na handouts? No? Bakit ba lahat yan tinatry mong i-store in your brain cells? No? It's not just because you want to get that doctor or MD or that license number. It's not just because you want to be rich or successful or good looking. Pwede na rin naman, no? But it's all of those things are secondary, no? It's not just because you want to please yourself, no? I mean, it's not just because you want to please your loved ones, no, or make your family happy. Although of course you have to say this will really make them happy once you do get that license. You have to remember that the reason why you're doing this is because you know that with that license, you will be given a greater opportunity to serve others. Kasi alam mo na pag may lisensya ka na, mas makapaglilingkod ka sa ibang tao, di ba? And that's a good thing. No? That is a good thing. You always remind yourself, no, that is why you're doing this. You're doing this so that you could serve others. Kasi yun naman talaga yun, no? You have to remember, go back, no? Pag nadi-disillusion ka na, go back to that person who went to that med school interview, di ba? When they ask you, why do you want to become a doctor? So, nung lahat tayo nun, idealistic pa, no? And then we went to med school, and then we started rotating in the hospitals, and our perspectives changed. But I hope, even if it's, kahit katiting na lang yung natitira dun sa idealistic self, and I hope you go back that, because that's what got you into this path in the first place. And that's the one, no? That tiny bit, kahit konting-konti na lang, no? That's the only thing that will get you through the most difficult days of this review period. Okay? So tatandaan na, pwedeng matulog, pwedeng mag-breakdown, pwedeng umiyak. Pero after 15 minutes, pag nag-ring na yung alarm, laban ulit. Okay? So let's proceed. So for lipids, what we will be discussing are the following. Number 1, we will discuss how you metabolize fatty acids and triglycerol. You will learn that these are major storage forms of energy in the body. And then we look at alternate fuel, your ketone bodies. So we use them during the fasting state. And then we'll discuss cholesterol, how it's useful. And finally, how we transport lipids in different parts of our body, no? So using your lipoproteins. So first, fatty acids and triacylglycerol. So what are fatty acids? So fatty acids are briefly long chains of carboxylic acid. So if you remember yung biochemistry, no? Or in organic chemistry, yung C double bond OH, no? You'll see highlighted in blue. That's the functional group of your carboxylic acids. So these three things you see on the screen, no? So these are all examples of fatty acids. So you have palmitic acid, stearic acid, and oleic acid. And then bakit sila tinawag na fatty acid? Dahil dun sa functional group na COOH. So these are, okay, so yung color blue, yan yung COOH. And then look, yung tails nila. So yung color blue, yung tinatawag natin na heads, no? Polar heads. Very polar component yun, no? And then they have non-polar tails. So bakit naman dito non-polar? Polar yung head, no? Kasi yung head niya puro it has hydrogen. Okay, may partially positive, partially negative component. Yung non-polar tails, you will see they're just hydrogen and carbon. How do we name fatty acids? So pag nakita kayo ng ganito, hydrocarbon chain with COOH, no? fatty acid yan. So we name them based on the number of carbons. What do we mean? So for example, if we look at palmitic acid, so it's palmitic acid pag nakakabit yung hydrogen. Pag nag-dissociate yung hydrogen, no? Ay, pag nag-dissociate, so for example, in an aqueous solution, this will tend to dissociate. The COO negative, tawag na niya sa kanya, palmitate. Why do you know this is palmitic acid? Let's count the number of carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. This has 16 carbons. That's why we know this is palmitic acid. It becomes palmitate pag tinanggal natin yung H. In contrast, let's look at stearic acid. Okay? So bilang nga kayo, no? Ilang carbons meron si stearic acid? (18), no? So 18 carbons. So dahil 18 carbons siya, that's why we know this is stearic acid. So see, no? So when you look at palmitic acid and stearic acid, both of them are what you call saturated fatty acids. When you say saturated fatty acids, you will see in the tails, all of these are single bonds. Diba? Puro single bond lang, no? Puro single bond lang. That's why they are saturated. Now, compare stearic acid with oleic acid here. Let's count the number of carbons of oleic acid. (18) din, no? So, just like stearic acid, oleic acid also has 18 carbons. Now, what's their difference? The difference is that if you look here at position number 9, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you have a double bond. No? At carbon number 9, you have a double bond. So, ito naman si oleic acid, ang tawag natin sa kanya, unsaturated. So, stearic and palmitic are saturated. Si oleic, unsaturated siya. And because it only has one double bond, it's called monounsaturated fatty acid. Why is this important? If you compare stearic and oleic acid, look at their three-dimensional illustrations. What happens when you put in a double bond? When you put in a double bond, you introduce a kink in the molecule. Diba? So, si palmitic tsaka stearic, dire-diretso lang. Si oleic, no, meron siyang kink dun sa molecule. Why is this significant? O kunyari, utusan kita, may dalawang box. Yung isang box, punuin natin ng stearic. The other box, punuin natin ng oleic. Aling box yung mas masisiksik natin or mapapack natin closely? Stearic or oleic? The correct answer, of course, is stearic. Kasing stearic, because it's just a straight molecule, kaya natin yung siksikin para lang matchsticks. Diba? Para lang matchsticks. Pero yung oleic, dahil may kink, no, hindi natin masiksik fully. No? Hindi natin sila masiksik fully because of the kink in the molecule. This becomes important because, no, for example, pag kinumpare natin yung vegetable oil, tsaka yung sebo. Ano ba yung sebo? No? Yung fat, for animal fat. At room temperature, no, yung animal fat, yung sebo, solid siya, di ba? Solid siya. Pero yung vegetable oil, it remains liquid. Ibig sabihin nun, no? Ano kayang ibig sabihin nun? Yung animal fat, anong mas marami sa kanya? Saturated or unsaturated? Marami sa kanyang saturated fatty acid. Kaya nakipack mo sila closely. This becomes important, because your saturated fatty acids, they are associated with cardiovascular disease. No? Ayaw natin ng saturated fatty acids because they can lead to atherosclerosis and stroke. In contrast, yung mga polyunsaturated fatty acids. When you say polyunsaturated, maraming double bond. Yun yung maganda sa atin. Those are protective against cardiovascular disease. Okay, so wag kakalimutan, no? So your fatty acids, anong important? The functional group. And then, remember, we name them based on the number of carbons. And then, after naming them, you must classify them whether they're saturated, unsaturated, or monounsaturated or polyunsaturated. So yung monounsaturated, yun yung MUFA, M-U-F-A. Polyunsaturated, PUFA, P-U-F-A. How do they participate? No? How do they participate in chemical reactions in the body, in metabolism? This is an important first step. So si fatty acid, so you see here, this is a fatty acid. Yung fatty acid, COO negative, again. No? So kunyari, palmitic yan, magiging palmitate. Bago siya mag-participate in any chemical reaction, all fatty acids have to be activated first. Tandaan na, before fatty acids participate in a chemical reaction, you have to activate them first. Just like yung mga carbohydrates. So, sige, babalikan natin yung carbohydrates. Yung mga carbohydrates, glucose, fructose, galactose. Before they participate in a chemical reaction, ano lagi yung first step nila? So, do you remember? Ano lagi yung first step ng metabolism ng glucose, galactose, and fructose? Pare-pareha sila, di ba? You add phosphate. So, yun yung activation nila. Kinakabitan muna sila ng phosphate. Kaya nga may glucokinase, galactokinase, fructokinase. Ito namang fatty acids, what do we add? Ang ina-add natin sa kanila, hindi naman phosphate. Ang ina-add natin, coenzyme A. No? Coenzyme A. So, using the enzyme acyl-CoA synthetase, or fatty acyl-CoA synthetase. No? Fatty acyl-CoA synthetase. Ne? So, yung palmitate, halimbawa, for example, palmitate, magiging palmitoyl-CoA. Palmitoyl coenzyme A. Now, coenzyme A contains pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5. No? Vitamin B5. So, laging ganyan. So, you will see, so tataka kayo, ano ba pinagkaiba ng synthase sa synthetase? When you say synthetase, no, it requires ATP. So, you see here, ATP. No? So, from ATP, you use two high energy bonds. So, you will see, when you activated, yung ATP naging adenosine monophosphate na. Yun yung bayad natin. We need to pay two high energy bonds. Kaya ang equivalent, pag tinanong kayo, how many ATPs are needed to activate fatty acids? The correct answer is actually 2. Because even though it's just one molecule, you use two high energy bonds. Okay, so remember that. Now, when you say acyl, that's a generic term for fatty acid. If you want to be more specific, pwede mong sabihin palmitoyl-CoA synthetase, or stearyl-CoA synthetase, o oleal-CoA synthetase. Kapag activated na sila, so you will see, no? So actually, no, yung acetyl-CoA, yung binabanggit natin na acetyl-CoA, it's actually the short fatty acid na inactivate. Acetic acid. Acetic acid, which is a carboxylic acid, you activate it. Kaya siya naging acetyl-CoA. Diba? So you will see, kapag CoA na tayo, activated acetic acid, activated fatty acid, tsaka lang sila pwedeng mag-participate sa chemical reactions. So you will see, pag acyl-CoA na, so this is the fatty acid, you see the hydrocarbon tail and the polar head. Okay? Kapag activated na, tsaka lang tayo pwedeng mag-participate into synthesis of fatty acids, phospholipids, glycolipids. Again, how many ATPs do you need to use? 2. So, 2 ATPs. So, kanina, babalikan natin, glycolysis. In the metabolism of glucose, how many ATPs are invested? 2, di ba? Step number 1 and step number 3. So, halos pareho lang. So, basta activation, usually 2 yung sagot. Okay, 2. Next. So, ngayon, okay, pupunta na tayo sa another pair of opposite pathways. Okay, so sa fatty acid metabolism, you need to remember 2 opposite pathways. Okay, fatty acid synthesis and beta oxidation, no? Fatty acid synthesis and beta oxidation. So yung fatty acid synthesis and beta oxidation, opposite pathways ulit sila, no? Opposite pathways ulit sila. So ibig sabihin, no? So fatty acid synthesis, the other name is lipogenesis. Lipogenesis or fatty acid synthesis, pampataba, no? So yung ito yung fatty acid pampataba to. So nakakapagpataba yung lipogenesis, kaya lipogenesis. In contrast, yung beta oxidation, desuction, no? Lipolysis, no? So pampapayat, no? Beta oxidation, pampapayat, lipolysis, breakdown of fat. Let's try to analyze. Dahil opposite pathway sila, no? Kailan ba tayo magpapataba? No? Kailan ka kaya magpapataba? When you are well-fed or when you are fasting? Or review, pag sinabi natin ng well-fed, how many hours after a meal? Pag fed state. Pag sinabi natin na fed state, well-fed state, it's the first 4 hours after a meal. So, magpapataba ba tayo, no? Magpapapayat? Siyempre, magpapataba. Which is why, no? If I ask you, what will insulin activate? Lipogenesis or lipolysis? Siyempre, lipogenesis. Pag may insulin, di ba, you're well-fed, you will activate fatty acid synthesis. In contrast, what will glucagon activate? Glucagon is the hormone of the fasting state. At ang i-activate naman niya, yung beta oxidation or lipolysis. Kasi, kapag hindi ka na kumakain, no, you need to break down fat to provide you energy. So, you need to break down fat to provide us energy. Okay, so wag kakalimutan, no? Fatty acid synthesis, lipogenesis, active during the well-fed state, inactive during the fasting state. It is activated by insulin. In contrast, lipolysis or beta oxidation, pampapayat. It is active during the fasting state. It is inhibited during the fed state. And the hormone that activates it will be glucagon. Now, aside from glucagon, it will also be activated by epinephrine, cortisol, and growth hormone. So let's go to lipogenesis. So let's answer the questions. What is it for? Lipogenesis is the synthesis of fatty acids, specifically palmitate. So pag sinabi natin na fatty acid synthesis, gagawa tayo ng fatty acid. At ang ginagawa natin by default ay palmitate. Or review. What's a functional group of palmitate? COOH. How many carbons does it contain in its tail? No? So how many carbons in the molecule? 16. No? So palmitate has 16 carbons. How many double bonds? 0. That's why, is it a monounsaturated or a polyunsaturated fatty acid? Neither, because it is saturated. No, it's a saturated fatty acid. Okay? So, where does it occur? No? Where does fatty acid synthesis occur? So, paano nyo matatandaan? Anong gusto nyo kung gawin nyo? Ang gawin nyo, tingin kayo sa bilbil nyo. No? Tingin ka sa bilbil mo. Okay? Tingin ka sa bilbil mo. Sabi mo sa bilbil mo, it's not your fault. Okay? Say it. Tingin ka sa bilbil mo. Sabi mo, it's not your fault. Okay? Bakit mo tatandaan yon? Remember, fatty acid synthesis, the majority of fatty acid synthesis doesn't actually happen in adipose tissue. Okay? So after a heavy meal, majority of fatty acid synthesis doesn't happen in adipose tissue. Instead, the majority of fatty acid synthesis happens in the liver. No? So si liver yung may kasalanan, no? Kaya tayo tumataba. Kawawa naman si liver, no? Martir na nga, sinisipa, no? So remember, tingin ka sa bilbil mo, it's not your fault. No? The majority of fatty acid synthesis happens in the liver. Okay? Where else does fatty acid synthesis happen? So aside from adipose tissue, it also happens in the mammary gland. Bakit naman sa mammary gland? Kasi, no, lactating mammary gland, yung majority of breast milk, that's short and medium chain fatty acids. Short and medium chain fatty acids yon. Ano ba ibig sabihin natin ng short and medium chain fatty acids? Yung short chain fatty acids, 6 carbons or less. Kapag 7 to 12, yun naman yung medium chain, no? Pag 13 to 18, long chain yon, fatty acids. Pag more than 18, yun na yung very long chain fatty acids. So 666 yung cutoff, no? Short chain is 6, medium chain is up to 12, up to 18 is long chain, and more than 18, that's very long chain. Yung brain tsaka lung, bakit kaya nilang important sa kanilang gumawa ng fatty acids? Sa lung, because of your surfactant. So surfactant contains dipalmitol phosphatidylcholine, no? That's a phospholipid which contains long fatty acids. Sa brain, no, yung myelin naman natin, sphingomyelin contains very long fatty acids. So what is the immediate substrate? So what's the starting point? The starting point is acetyl-CoA. So acetyl-CoA. So ang short equation niyan, fatty acid synthesis is from acetyl-CoA, gagawin natin, no? So from acetyl-CoA, gagawin natin siyang palmitate, no? So palmitol-CoA. If you remember, ilang carbons ba meron si acetyl-CoA? 2. So from 2 carbons acetyl-CoA, pahahabain lang natin siya para maging 16 palmitol-CoA. Ganun lang kadali ang fatty acid synthesis. From 2 carbon compound, gagawin natin siyang 16 carbon compound. The rate-limiting step is acetyl-CoA carboxylase, which converts acetyl-CoA to malonyl-CoA and uses up ATP. Okay, tatandaan nyo muna to, no? Acetyl-CoA carboxylase, that's the rate-limiting step of fatty acid synthesis. So, anong kwento nun? No? So, remember, saan ba nanggaling si acetyl-CoA? So, again, kailan tayo tataba? No? During the fed state. So, if you remember, during the fed state, kakain tayo, no? Okay, so, ito tayo. So, yung fatty acids natin, the starting point para makagawa ng fatty acids ay gumawa ng acetyl-CoA. No? Gumawa ng acetyl-CoA. Now, minsan may mga tao sasabihin nila, bakit ganun? Hindi ko maintindihan bakit ako tumataba. No? Bakit ako tumataba? Hindi naman ako mahilig sa lechon. Hindi naman ako mahilig sa chicharon. Hindi naman ako mahilig sa butter. Iwas naman ako sa mantika no? Pero mahilig ako mag-bread, mahilig ako mag-milk tea, mahilig ako mag-cheesecake. No, milk tea every day. No? Ayun, tataba ka talaga no? So, how does a high carbohydrate diet leads to obesity or being overweight? So, this is the explanation. So, you see here, sabi natin yung fatty acids, ang starting point niya ay acetyl-CoA. But you have to remember, saan ba nanggaling si acetyl-CoA? Babalikan ko yung question. No? So, during the well-fed state, saan ba nanggagaling si acetyl-CoA? Saang pathway? Galing sa glycolysis. Diba? If you remember, glucose is converted to pyruvate, and then pyruvate is converted to acetyl-CoA using the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. Bakit nga natin hindi makakalimutan si pyruvate dehydrogenase? Sa buong biochemistry, siya ang pinaka maarte. Ano ulit yung 5 cofactors niya? Thiamine, FAD, NAD, coenzyme A, lipoic acid. Okay? And then, anong sabi natin? Once you convert pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, there is no turning back. No? So, si pyruvate, basta naging acetyl-CoA na yan, hindi na yan pwedeng maging glucose. Okay? Ulit. Once you convert pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, there is no turning back. It will not be possible to convert acetyl-CoA back to glucose. Huwag niyo yung kakalimutan. So, ano mangyayari? So, si acetyl-CoA magki-Krebs cycle siya, di ba? Papasok siya ng Krebs cycle. Pag nag-Krebs cycle, ilang NADH ang mapoproduce? 3. Ilang FADH? 1. Ilang GTP? 1. Diba? So, for a total of 10 ATPs. So, Krebs cycle tayo ng Krebs cycle. Okay? Pero pag hindi na natin kailangan ng ATP, no? Marami na tayong ATP, hindi na tayo mag-Krebs cycle. Saan ngayon pupunta si acetyl-CoA? Hindi na siya pwedeng bumalik kay glucose. Dahil hindi siya pwedeng bumalik kay glucose, tapos hindi naman siya pwedeng mag-Krebs cycle, saan siya pupunta? Pupunta siya dito sa fatty acid synthesis. Is that clear? So, this is the reason why a high carbohydrate diet can lead to obesity. No? Kasi basta tumami yung carbohydrates, dadami ang acetyl-CoA, kung hindi mo na kailangan sa Krebs cycle, dito na lang siya pupunta sa fat. So, ang moral of the story, kaya always remember, think twice before you extra rice. Okay? Think twice before you extra rice. So, yan talaga yung nakakapataba. No? So, rice, soft drinks, juices, no? So, yung mga iced tea, no? Bottomless iced tea, because that's just sugar, no? That you're introducing to your diet. So, let's go back. So, sabi natin, where does fatty acid synthesis happen? Fatty acid synthesis happens in the cytosol. Okay, so saan tayo nagpapataba? Sa cytosol. But when you think about it, ang starting point natin acetyl-CoA. So balikan natin tong diagram, di ba? Yung acetyl-CoA, nasaan ba siya? Saan ba natin pinoproduce si acetyl-CoA? We produce acetyl-CoA in the mitochondria. So you will see here, di ba? Nandun siya sa mitochondria. We produce acetyl-CoA in the mitochondria. Pero yung fatty acid synthesis, mangyayari sa cytosol. So, from mitochondria, kailangan nating lumabas sa cytosol. Bakit problem yun? Because Sinong membrane yung haharang sa atin? Si inner mitochondrial membrane. So, si inner mitochondrial membrane, haharangan na naman niya tayo. So, anong solusyon doon? Kung nakaharang si inner mitochondrial membrane, tatawag lang tayo ng shuttle. So, sasakay tayo ng shuttle. So, this time, anong shuttle yung sasakyan natin? Ang sasakyan natin shuttle is your citrate shuttle. So, you will see, you convert acetyl-CoA to citrate dun sa Krebs cycle. And then, citrate shuttle, lalabas tayo. Pag dalbas natin sa cytosol, sabi cytosol na, bababa na ulit si acetyl-CoA. At si acetyl-CoA, pupunta na siya sa fatty acid synthesis. So, remember, fatty acid synthesis, anong shuttle? Citrate. Ang mnemonic natin dyan, citrate. I8. Pag kumain ka, tataba ka. Okay, balikan natin kanina. Ano yung dalawang shuttle sa glycolysis? Yung glycerophosphate, tsaka malate aspartate. Alin yung, saang shuttle? Yung 3 ATPs pa din, 2.5 ATPs pa din yung makukuha natin. Yung malate aspartate. Kasi yung malate aspartate, mas safe. Yung glycerophosphate, 1.5 ATPs na lang kasi naho-hold up tayo. Sasakay kang NADH pero pagbaba mo, FADH na lang. Okay? So, remember this. So, anong purpose ng citrate shuttle? Ang purpose ni citrate shuttle, yung mga acetyl-CoA na na-produce during glycolysis and conversion of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA nasa mitochondria. Nilalabas niya yung acetyl-CoA na yun sa cytosol. Kasi sa cytosol, dun mangyayari yung fatty acid synthesis. So, what's the next step? So, remember, acetyl-CoA has 2 carbons. So, you will see here, look at acetyl-CoA. If we count the number of carbons, 1, 2. Don't count CoA, ha? Yung CoA letter C, hindi yan carbon. So, 2 carbons yung acetyl-CoA. The next step is the rate-limiting step of fatty acid synthesis. Yung acetyl-CoA, gagawin nating malonyl-CoA. So, you see here, from 2 carbons, gagawin natin siyang 1, 2, 3. 3 carbon compound known as malonyl-CoA. So, acetyl-CoA to malonyl-CoA, the enzyme is acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Okay? Acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So, it's a carboxylase. You add a carbon. So, dahil carboxylase siya, ang cofactor niya, biotin. So, remember, lahat ng carboxylase, biotin. Biotin, lahat. Basta na-irinig yung carboxylase yung enzyme, biotin yung cofactor niyan. So, tatanungin kayo, what vitamin is required by acetyl-CoA carboxylase? Biotin. Ano pa yung isang carboxylase ulit na inaral natin kanina? Pyruvate carboxylase, which converts pyruvate to oxaloacetate. So, if you remember, yung crossroads ni pyruvate, up, down, left, or right, no? Saan si pyruvate carboxylase? So, right, no? Pyruvate to oxaloacetate, which is for gluconeogenesis. So, both acetyl-CoA carboxylase and pyruvate carboxylase require biotin. So, this is the rate-limiting step of lipogenesis. So, therefore, anong effect sa kanya ni insulin? So, si insulin, hormone of the fed state, anong gusto niyang gawin kay acetyl-CoA carboxylase? I-activate because gusto natin magpataba pag fed state. In contrast, anong gagawin sa kanya ni glucagon? Si glucagon naman ay i-inhibit, no? So, glucagon, i-inhibit. Sino mga kampi ni glucagon? Si epinephrine, si growth hormone, si cortisol. So, yung effect nila, no? Pag tinanong kayo, ang tanong sa question, epinephrine, glucagon, epinephrine, cortisol, or growth hormone, isipin nila, ano kayang gagawin ni glucagon? No, yun din yung gagawin nila. Next. So, after natin mapahaba, no, from acetyl-CoA naging malonyl-CoA na, no, from 2 naging 3, gagawin na natin 16. Paano natin siya gagawing 16? Elongation to palmitoyl-CoA. The enzyme responsible for this is an enzyme complex known as fatty acid synthase. So, you see, this is the fatty acid synthase complex. It normally exists as a dimer. Meaning to say, dalawang enzymes magkadikit sila, no? So, you will see, this is fatty acid synthase. And you look at your fatty acid synthase. It contains pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5. So, vitamin B5 is very important for fatty acid metabolism. Sa activation, nandun din siya, di ba? And cysteine. So, wag kalimutan, cysteine, minsan tinatanong to. So, you have a series of steps. Ang ginagawa niya, ang purpose ng enzyme na to, siya yung magpapahaba ng acetyl-CoA. So, let's take a look. You will see you have position 1 and position 2 earlier. No? Sinabi natin may position 1 and position 2. Naka-dimer yan. Dalawa sila in tandem nagtatrabaho. Sa position 1, so you see this, this is the enzyme. Sa position 1, kakabit itong molecule na to. Who is this molecule? If we count the number of carbons, 1, 2. So therefore, that's acetyl-CoA. Sa position 2 naman, sino itong nakakabit? 1, 2, 3. Malonyl-CoA. So sa position 2, si malonyl-CoA. Saan ang galing si malonyl-CoA? From what enzyme? Galing siya kay acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So position 1, acetyl-CoA. Position 2, malonyl-CoA. Yun yung first. What's the next step? The next step, nakita nyo itong color blue. Nakita nyo itong may asterisk. Sinang ka-color blue, no? I-displace niya yung naka-asterisk. So that's what we call condensation. So color blue, lilipat siya from position 1, i-displace niya yung naka-asterisk. So 2 plus 3 equals 5. Minus 1, kasi kinik-out niya yan, equals 4. So 4 carbons na lang. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Nasa na yung may asterisk? Lalabas siya as carbon dioxide. You release carbon dioxide. The next step is called reduction. See this double bond? We reduce it. We reduce it so that it becomes single bond. So that's reduction. So reduction. So dadagdagan natin siya ng electrons. So pag may na-reduce, kailangan may ma-oxidize. No? Kailangan may ma-oxidize. So sino yung ma-oxidize? Kung ma-reduce siya, si NADH ma-oxidize. Gagamit tayo ng NADPH. So gagamit tayo ng NADPH. Question. Saan galing si NADPH? Saang pathway? Binanggit natin yan kanina. Galing siya sa pentose phosphate pathway or hexose monophosphate shunt. Remember, sabi natin, yung hexose monophosphate shunt may 2 phases. Phase 1 and phase 2. Saan galing si NADPH? Sa phase 1. Ano yung important na enzyme ng phase 1? Glucose-6-phosphate dehydrogenase. So, kaya siya important. So, yung mga organs na nagre-reproduce ng fatty acids, kailangan active din sa kanila yung pentose phosphate pathway kasi doon kukunin yung NADPH. After natin ma-reduce, no, tatanggalin natin ang water molecule. So, this H2O, tatanggalin natin yung H2O. We dehydrate, okay, leading to this molecule. And then finally, look, this double bond, tatanggalin natin yung double bond, i-reduce natin siya ulit. Okay, i-reduce natin siya ulit. So, single bonds na siya. So, ano nangyari? At the end of one cycle, yung 2-carbon compound natin na acetyl-CoA, so look, our starting point was acetyl-CoA, diba? Condense, reduce, dehydrate, reduce, magiging ilan na? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, from 2 carbon, naging 4 carbons na siya. Humaba na tayo. From this, naging 4 carbons after one cycle of condensation, reduction, dehydration, reduction. What's going to be the next step? Ang next step, yung 4 carbons na yan, lilipat sa position 1. So ito, lilipat siya doon. Ito, lilipat siya doon. Paglipat niya doon, bakante na naman yung position 2. Papasukan naman siya ulit ng malonyl-CoA. Ulit. So yung 4 na to, lilipat sa position 1. Yung position 2, papasukan ng bagong malonyl-CoA. Sinong enzyme ang magsusupply ng malonyl-CoA? Si acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Kaya siya naging rate-limiting step. Okay, so ngayon ano naman? Magko-code, uulitin ulit natin yung condensation, reduction, dehydration, reduction. So ito, but this time, 4 plus 3. 7 minus 1, 6. Bakit minus 1? Kasi lalabas to as carbon dioxide. So at the end of the second cycle, yung 4 naging 6. Anong gagawin natin? Yung 6, lilipat natin sa position 1. Yung position 2, papasok na naman si malonyl-CoA. At the end of that cycle, third cycle, yung 6 magiging 8. Tapos magiging 10. Tapos magiging 12. Tapos magiging 14. Tapos magiging 16. So, uulitin-ulitin lang natin siya hanggang maging 16, which is our end product, which is palmitol-CoA. Is that clear? So, pag fatty acid synthesis, this is how we elongate a 2-carbon compound, acetyl-CoA, to a 16-carbon compound, palmitol-CoA. Okay? So, anong uulit-ulitin? Condensation, reduction, dehydration, reduction. So, therefore, anong mnemonic natin dyan? Code red. Ilang beses natin siya kailangan ulitin? Let's count. So, from 2 magiging 4, tapos 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So, yeah, we have to repeat code red 7 times. Ilang NADPH ang gagamitin natin? So, 7 times 1, 2, 14. So, if they ask you how many molecules of NADH are needed to synthesize 1 molecule of palmitic acid, palmitol-CoA, the answer is 14. 2 times 7. So, let's watch a video. So, if you watch this video, you will see. Okay. So that's acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA, papunta siya sa position number 1. Tapos, sa position 2. Okay, so pupunta siya sa position 1. Yan. Tapos sa position 2, okay? Sa position 2, pupunta si malonyl-CoA. Okay, so acetyl-CoA sa position 1, malonyl-CoA sa position 2. What will happen? So ito, i-displace niya yung color pink, condensation. And then, lalabas as carbon dioxide. So 2 plus 3 minus 1. Next, NADPH, we reduce. Okay, we reduce. And then, kita niyang H2O, tatanggalin, dehydrate. Pagka-dehydrate, it will undergo another step of reduction ulit. So, i-reduce naman niya. Again, papasok na naman sa NADPH. So, at the end of one cycle, you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, which is butyryl-CoA. So, take note of this step. Ito yung kailangan niyo matandaan. Si butyryl-CoA, lilipat siya sa position 1. Okay? Sa position 2, andun na naman yung bagong malonyl-CoA. And then we just repeat code red. At the end of the second cycle, you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. Yung 6 carbons na yan, anong mangyayari? Lilipat sa position 1. Paglipat niya sa position 1, bakante na naman, paulit-ulit lang hanggang maging 16. Okay? Hanggang maging 16. So, saan nanggagaling yung NADPH? As we've said, no? So, you will see here, no? Synthesis of palmitate. You see, tingnan nyo to, no? Pa-acetyl-CoA to palmitate. Kailangan natin ng NADPH. And majority of that NADPH will come from the pentose phosphate pathway. So, you will see here, majority of NADPH will come from the pentose phosphate pathway. But there are other sources. What are the other sources? Your malic enzyme and your isocitrate dehydrogenase enzyme. The isocitrate dehydrogenase enzyme is only significant in ruminants. No? Sa atin, hindi. Majority will come from the pentose phosphate pathway. Ibig sabihin ba nun, lahat ng fatty acid natin, 16 carbons lang? Lahat ba palmitate lang? Of course, the answer is no. So, if you remember, where did we synthesize fatty acids? We synthesize them in the cytosol. Kung kailangan natin ng mas mahaba, more than 16, dadali natin sila sa smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So, look at this electron microscope picture. Ito yung smooth ER. Yung smooth ER, wala siyang tuldok-tuldok. Ito rough ER to. Bakit siya rough ER? Yung rough ER, merong ribosomes. Yung smooth ER, wala. And smooth endoplasmic reticulum is important for synthesizing complex lipids. So, yung mga long-chain fatty acids, more than 18, no? Kung gusto natin pahabain, no? Very long-chain fatty acids, doon natin yung gagawin sa smooth ER. Kung gusto natin lagyan ng double bond, sa smooth ER din yan, like oleic acid. Now, you have to remember, we can only add double bond up to position number 9. So, we can only add double bonds up to position number 9, which is why oleic acid we can synthesize. But not linoleic and linolenic. So what are linoleic and linolenic acid? Linoleic and linolenic acid are your essential fatty acids. No, we cannot synthesize them because they have more than one double bond. Next, we will discuss triglycerides or triacylglycerol. O, diba sabi natin, no, we produce palmitate, which has 16 carbon, saturated fatty acid. Where do we produce it? Which organ? Ay, tatandaan na, it's not your fault. Whose fault is it? So, majority of fatty acid synthesis happens in the liver. So, pag kumain tayo ng madami, no, yung carbohydrates, kino-convert natin yun to fatty acids in the liver. Kasi liver, anong gagawin niya? Papamigay lang niya yan. No? Papamigay niya into the different organs. So, but first, no, how do we store excess fatty acids? So, kunyari, gumawa ka ng maraming fatty acids or marami kang fatty acids sa diet, paano natin siya masustore? So, fatty acids are stored as triacylglycerols or triglycerides. So, yung bilbil mo, pag tinignan mo yung bilbil mo, most of that are triglycerides. No? Most of that are triglycerides. So, let's review. Glucose. How do you store glucose? Excess glucose is stored as glycogen. Where do you store excess glycogen? Where do you store glycogen? Liver and muscle. No, liver and muscle. So, in triglycerides, no, most of this we store in adipose tissues. Yung adipose natin, the largest energy reserve. Why do we need to store fatty acids as triglyceride? Yung fatty acid, yung mga palmitate, negatively charged kasi yun. No? You want to, pag triglycerol, the triacylglycerol, magiging neutral fat. So, what is triacylglycerol? So, when you see, let's look here. This is the glycerol molecule. No? So, look at the glycerol molecule. Yung glycerol molecule, okay, if you look, your glycerol molecule is 3 carbons, 1, 2, 3. It's this is the glycerol molecule, 1, 2, 3 carbons. Pag yung hydroxyl group na yan, pinalitan natin, nag-esterify tayo, you have an ester bond. If you create an ester bond to connect a fatty acid, like palmitate. So, yung palmitate, ikabit mo dito. This is now what you call monoacylglycerol. Kasi glycerol molecule with one fatty acid attached. Kapag dalawa yung naka-attached, diacylglycerol. Kapag tatlo, yun na yung triacylglycerol. So, I just want to correct na most of the time, yung configuration, yung dalawang fatty acid nasa position 1 and position 3. No, hindi sila usually magkatabi. Usually magkalayo sila, no, rather than this. So, monoacylglycerol, diacylglycerol, triacylglycerol, or triglyceride. So, pag sinabi natin na triglyceride, tatandaan, glycerol attached to 3 fatty acids. So, paano ba natin yung ginagawa? How do we synthesize triglycerides? We synthesize them in the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So, again, di ba, basta complex lipids, no? So, here, triglyceride synthesis or triacylglycerol happens in the liver and in adipose tissue. So, look here. Saan natin kukunin yung glycerol? Yung glycerol, saan natin siya kinukuha? Look, kinukuha natin siya sa glycolysis. So, glucose is converted to DHAP, and then DHAP is converted to glycerol phosphate. Does that make sense? No? Does that make sense na yung glycerol kukunin natin sa glycolysis? The correct answer is yes. Why? Kasi pag fed state, kailan tayo magpapataba? When do we need to undergo lipogenesis? During the fed state. During the fed state, tumatakbo din ba yung glycolysis? Yes, remember that glycolysis is also activated during the fed state kasi maraming glucose. Kaya habang tumatakbo yung fatty acid synthesis, gumagawa din tayo ng backbone, the glycerol backbone. So yung glycerol phosphate, as you can see here, it comes from DHAP, no? Which is from glycolysis. So nangyayari yun sa liver tsaka sa adipose tissue. Now sa liver, aside from getting glycerol phosphate from glycolysis, it is also able to phosphorylate free glycerol. So kung may pakalat-kalat na glycerol, kaya niyang kabitan ng phosphate para maging glycerol phosphate. Okay, so using enzyme glycerol kinase. So you will see here, so look, pag meron na tayong glycerol phosphate, in glycerol phosphate, kabitan mo ng 3 fatty acid, meron na tayong triacylglycerol. Magkaiba sila ng purpose. So remember, the liver, why does it need to produce fatty acids and triacylglycerol? Gagawa siya ng triglycerides for export to other tissues. So, kumain ka ng madami. Pag kumain ka ng madami, nag-buffet ka, si liver, gagawa siya ng triglycerides. Yung triglycerides na yun, i-export niya, papamigay niya sa different organs. Oh, padala ko yan sa'yo para meron kang energy kapag fasting na tayo. Oh, ano bang address mo? Papagrab ko na lang dyan. Di ba? Papagrab ko na lang dyan. Okay? Ito naman, no, sa adipose tissue, to store, no, so gagawa siya ng glycerol, triacylglycerol for storage. No? So, yan yung ating largest energy reserve. Okay? So, remember, during the fed state, fatty acid synthesis, triglyceride synthesis. Paano naman pag fasting? Paano pag hindi na tayo kumakain? No? So, during a fast, stored fat is hydrolyzed to release fatty acids and glycerol from their triglyceride form. So, if you remember, no? So, kung idodrawing natin siya, P. Okay. So, if you remember, si triglyceride, no? So, ang i-drawing natin dyan ay, yan, kunyari ito, that's a glycerol backbone. Tapos, fatty acid number 1, fatty acid number 2, okay, fatty acid number 3. Okay. So, ngayon, no? Tapos sabi natin, ako, hindi na tayo kumakain. No? Sabi mo, fasting ka na. O, one day, hindi ka na kumakain. No? So, starting 8 o'clock, sabi, hindi ako kakain. The next day, well, wala ka ng energy source. No? So, ano lang sasabihin mo ngayon dun sa bilbil mo? No? Tingin ka sa bilbil mo. No? So, sabi mo sa kanya, oras na. No? Oras na. No? So, oras na. So, anong gagawin natin? Diba, in-store natin yung fats natin as triglyceride. So, magagamit na ba natin to as energy? Yung triglyceride na yan? Pwede na ba yung pumasok sa Krebs cycle? Yes or no? Try to think. Ito bang si triglyceride, makakapasok ba yan sa Krebs cycle? The correct answer, of course, is no. Diba? Kasi masyado siyang malaki, masyado siyang bulky. Anong kailangan natin gawin? Yung triglyceride molecule na yan, kailangan natin siyang gupitin. No? So, yan, scissors. So, you will see, gugupitin natin. So, bakit na siya kailangan gupitin? No? So, you will see there, okay, cut natin siya. Yan. So, pag ginupit natin siya, no? So, gugupitin natin. Ano mangyayari? Ito na ngayon yung fatty acids. Mare-release na yung fatty acids. At ito naman, sino to? Si glycerol. What will happen next? So, yung fatty acids, pag nagupit na natin, anong gagawin natin? Remember, that's palmitate. Okay? Pwede na ba natin siyang gamitin for energy? Pwede na ba siyang pumasok sa Krebs cycle? No. Kasi si palmitate, ilang carbons? 16, di ba? 16. So, yung 16 carbons, kailangan muna natin i-convert to, sino yung pumapasok sa Krebs cycle? Acetyl-CoA. No? So, yun yung i-discuss natin mamaya. So, yung palmitate, paano natin siya ibabalik kay acetyl-CoA? Okay? So, before that, so ito yung tinatag natin na mobilization of stored fats. Pag sinabi natin na mobilization of stored fats, yung bilbil mo na triglyceride, ibabalik natin to glycerol and fatty acids. So, sino gumagawa nun? Yung C-source. Sino yung C-source? Ang tawag dun sa C-source, yung enzyme na tawag sa kanya, hormone-sensitive lipase. So, pag sinabing lipase, yun yung rule niya, yung triglycerides na gagupit. Why is it called hormone-sensitive lipase? Because it is sensitive to hormones. So, sino kaya mag-activate sa kanya? Sino kaya mag-activate sa gunting? Si insulin or si glucagon? Of course, si glucagon. Kasi si glucagon, yun yung fasting state. Hormone of the fasting state. So, remember, glucagon, no? Sabi niya, gutom ka na. You're fast. Anong sabi niya? Fasting tayo. Okay. Sino second messenger niya? Si cyclic AMP. So, gugupitin niya ngayon. Uutusan niya si hormone-sensitive lipase. Gupitin mo na yung triglycerides kasi kailangan na natin i-release yung fatty acids. Sino mag-i-inhibit sa kanya? Si insulin. Kasi pag fed state, kailangan mo bang gupitin yung taba mo? Of course not. Kasi meron ka namang carbohydrates. Let's extend the question. Okay. Kailan active, no? Kailan active si hormone-sensitive lipase? Pag phosphorylated or dephosphorylated? O, tandaan, anong mnemonic natin? Dephosphorylated, walang phosphate. Diba? Kasi walang phosphate, WF, well-fed. Pag phosphorylated, F, fasting. Okay. So, kailan siya magiging active? Pag fasting. So, therefore, active siya kapag phosphorylated. So, you see here, glucagon and phosphorylation. Okay. So, let's see. So, ulit, anong sabi natin, no? You stored your fatty acids as triglyceride. During the fasting state, mataas yung glucagon, mababa yung insulin, no? Or mataas yung cortisol, epinephrine. What happens? Your triglycerides, gugupitin siya ni hormone-sensitive lipase. Okay, your triglycerides, gugupitin siya ni hormone-sensitive lipase so that you get glycerol and fatty acids. Ang question, si glycerol ba, tatapon na lang natin yan? So, ginupit mo na ngayon yung fatty acids, tatapon na lang ba natin si glycerol? Of course not. Kasi tayo, gusto natin lahat ng pwedeng gawing energy, gagamitin nating energy. So, yung glycerol, i-convert natin pabalik to glucose. Using what pathway? Gluconeogenesis. Remember, sabi natin kanina, no, balikan niyo yung video, yung lecture on gluconeogenesis. Yung glycerol, it can become a source of glucose during the fasting state. It is a substrate of gluconeogenesis. So, yung glycerol, pwede nating ma-convert to glucose. How? That glycerol is returned to DHAP. At pag naging DHAP na siya, pwede na siyang mag-gluconeogenesis, maging glucose na ulit. Kasi nga hindi tayo kumakain. So yung triglyceride, walang tapon doon. Yung fatty acid, papasok sa beta oxidation. Yung glycerol, pupunta naman sa gluconeogenesis. O question, saang organ mangyayari ang gluconeogenesis? Liver and gluconeogenesis. Kidney. Di ba? So sa liver and kidney, the glycerol is converted back to glucose. Now, what will happen to the fatty acids? Yung fatty acids naman, yung palmitate, gagawin nating acetyl-CoA. So you will see fatty acids are converted to acetyl-CoA so that acetyl-CoA can enter the Krebs cycle. So tatandaan, so during the fasting state, saan nanggagaling si acetyl-CoA? Sa beta oxidation. Yung tinatawag natin na beta oxidation, yung palmitate, gagawin nating acetyl-CoA ulit. O review, in the well-fed state, saan nanggagaling si acetyl-CoA? What pathway? Glycolysis. Pero pag fasting, saan siya manggagaling? Sa beta oxidation. So remember this diagram very well. No? Fasting state, from triglycerides, magiging glycerol and fatty acid. Glycerol magiging glucose, fatty acid magiging acetyl-CoA. This is just an illustration. So you will see, ito yung bilbil mo. No? Ito yung bilbil mo using hormone-sensitive lipase. So you see the hormone-sensitive lipase. Si hormone-sensitive lipase, take note, look, glucagon activates hormone-sensitive lipase by phosphorylation. Look, no? May phosphate. Si hormone-sensitive lipase, gugupitin niya yung triglycerides para ma-release si fatty acids. And then the fatty acids will now travel, no, to the tissues so that they can be used for energy. The glycerol will be brought back to the liver or to the kidney for gluconeogenesis. So, ito yon, beta oxidation. So, yung beta oxidation, anong ginagawa natin? Yung 16-carbon na palmitate, of course, hindi lang palmitate, no, marami pang iba, all the other fatty acids. So, yung 16-carbon, kailangan natin gawing 2 carbons. So, kanina, baligtad, no? Yung acetyl-CoA, pinahaba natin. Ano yung inulit-ulit natin na steps? Code red. Anong rate-limiting step? Acetyl-CoA carboxylase, which requires biotin. So, ngayon naman yung 16-carbon, anong gagawin natin para maging acetyl-CoA? Icha-chop-chop natin siya. No? So, 16 carbons, icha-chop-chop natin yan. Para yung 16, makakuha tayo ng mga 2 carbon fragments. So, beta oxidation is the removal of acetyl-CoA fragments from the ends of fatty acids, yielding NADH and FADH in the process. Okay, yung acetyl-CoA, papasok sa Krebs cycle, and then look, gagawa din tayo ng NADH and FADH. Pag nakakita kayo ng NADH and FADH, anong maisip nyo? Cheque. At yung cheque, pwede nating encash. Where does it occur? Not all organs can undergo beta oxidation. But the majority, no, pinakamalakas gumamit ng fatty acids, no, pinaka-particular yung muscle. So the muscle and the liver can use fatty acids. So lalo na yung muscle. Muscle yung pinakamalakas gumamit ng fatty acids. Okay? Si brain, bakit kaya siya hindi pwedeng gumamit ng fatty acids for energy? So yung fatty acids, no, if you look, your fatty acids are very bulky. Hindi yan nakakapasok ng blood-brain barrier. Tapos wala ring significant triglyceride stores sa brain. Si red blood cell, bakit hindi pwedeng gumamit ng fatty acids during fasting? Because fatty acid beta oxidation happens in the mitochondria. So look, beta oxidation occurs in the mitochondria. Or review, saan tayo nagpapataba? Sa cytosol. So nagpapataba tayo sa cytosol, saan tayo nagpapapayat? Sa mitochondria. So baliktad, no? So paano nyo maalala yan, no? So imagine niyo yung mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. Para yung mainit kaya dyan or malamig? Yung mitochondria, dahil powerhouse of the cell, mainit yan. Imagine mo parang sauna yan. Ang init, no? Mainit yan. So tataba ka doon, papayat. Papayat tayo doon, no? In contrast, yung cytosol, para yung swimming pool. Swimming pool, pero hindi ka magsuswimming, nakatihaya ka lang doon, no? So tataba ka doon. Okay, so beta oxidation happens in the mitochondria, fatty acid synthesis happens in the cytosol. So the substrate, starting point of beta oxidation is palmitate. The product, acetyl-CoA, NADH, and FADH. The rate-limiting step is the transport of fatty acyl-CoA from the cytosol to the mitochondria. And the enzyme is carnitine palmitoyl transferase. So you will see here, look, sabi natin, diba, yung fatty acids, galing halimbawa sa adipose tissue, gugupitin ni hormone-sensitive lipase. Look, yung fatty acids natin, ita-transport natin sila, bound to albumin. Tapos, so galing sila sa liver or galing sila sa adipose tissue, no? Ta-travel sila sa blood. Tapos papasok sila sa cell. Look, pagpasok nila sa cell, saan ba nila kailangan pumunta? Sa mitochondria, di ba? Tama. Nasan sila ngayon? Nasa cytosol pa lang sila. Makakalusot pa sila papuntang mitochondria? Yes or no? Of course, no. Kasi hindi na naman sila palulusutin ni inner mitochondrial membrane. So therefore, kailangan na naman nating sumakay ng shuttle. So you see here, this is your fatty acyl-CoA. No, anong ginawa natin kay fatty acid? Inactivate natin siya. So palmitate, gagawin muna natin palmitoyl-CoA. O, ilang ATPs ang kailangan natin doon? From palmitate to palmitoyl-CoA. Activation, 2. Pag palmitoyl-CoA na, look what will happen. From the cytosol, papasok tayo sa intermembranous space. Pero pagdating dito, as palmitoyl-CoA, hindi na tayo palulusutin ni inner membrane. So, anong kailangan natin gawin? Look, palmitoyl-CoA, nandun si carnitine. Anong gagawin ni carnitine? Si palmitoyl-CoA, papalit sila. Magiging fatty acyl-carnitine. So, partner muna siya temporarily kay carnitine. Tapos, as fatty acyl-carnitine, sila na yung makakalusot. Pagdating sa loob, si-switch back tayo sa CoA. So, magre-release na ulit si carnitine. So, si carnitine, anong trabaho niya? No? Temporarily, kumakabit siya kay fatty acid para makalusot si fatty acid sa loob. Okay? Para makalusot si fatty acid sa loob. So, andun na ulit tayo, palmitoyl-CoA. Ang tawag dyan, carnitine shuttle. So, the enzyme is carnitine palmitoyl transferase. No? Transferase 1 sa outer membrane, transferase 2 sa inner membrane. Anong tatandaan? Kanina, sa fatty acid synthesis, anong shuttle natin? Citrate, I8. Ngayon naman, carnitine. Carnitine, pampapayat. No? Kaya, di ba, maraming carnitine drinks that are being marketed for weight loss? Ito yun, no? Yung carnitine kasi, no, it promotes, no? It is used in beta oxidation. So, nasa loob na tayo, no? Nandun na tayo sa loob ng mitochondria. Kasi doon tayo magbe-beta oxidation, remember? Doon tayo magbe-beta oxidation. So, yung palmitate natin, how many carbons? 16. Your palmitate has 16 carbons. Anong goal natin? Maging acetyl-CoA. Let me tell you a story. Kunyari, 4 kayong magkakapatid. No? 4 kayong magkakapatid tapos nag-uwi ng Hershey bar yung tatay mo. Sabi ng tatay mo, oh anak, hati-hati kayo. Kung 4 kayong magkakapatid, ilang beses natin kailangan i-break yung Hershey bar? 3. So look, 1, 2, 3. Kawawa naman yung bunso, no? May kagat na. Okay? So, kung may Hershey bar, you have to cut it 3 times, di ba? Para meron kang 4 pieces. Okay? Paano naman kung 8 kayong magkakapatid? Kung 8 kayong magkakapatid, ilang beses mo siya kailangan i-cut? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that you end up with 8 pieces. Correct? Parang ganun din yung gagawin natin kay palmitoyl-CoA. Your palmitoyl-CoA has 16 carbons. 16 carbons, anong gusto mo mangyari? 2 carbons, di ba? So, ilang acetyl-CoA yung makukuha natin sa isang palmitate? So, 16 divided by 2, 8 pieces. So, kung kailangan natin ng 8 pieces, ilang beses natin kailangan i-chop-chop si palmitate? 7 times. So, ganun yung beta oxidation. Palmitoyl-CoA, i-chop-chop natin siya 7 times, so we end up with 8 pieces of acetyl-CoA. This time, no, para kabaligtaran naman to ng code red, no? So, kung kanina, fatty acid synthase, ngayon naman, fatty acid oxidase. So, you will see, the enzyme compound complex here is fatty acid oxidase, where you repeat a series of steps 7 times. So, bakit siya tinawag na beta oxidation? Because the reactions happen around the beta carbon, no? So, you will see, this is the beta carbon, doon nangyayari yung mga reaction, no? Kaya siya beta oxidation. Ano yung uulit-ulitin natin 7 times? Kung kanina code red, ito naman, OHOT. Oxidation, hydration, oxidation, thiolysis. So, opposite lang siya ng code red. No? So, condensation, the opposite is lysis. Oxidation, it's the opposite of reduction. Hydration, it's the opposite of dehydration. And once again, oxidation, opposite of reduction. So, baliktad lang. So, the enzymes is known, they are collectively known as fatty acid oxidase. Pinaka-important, the first one, fatty acyl-CoA dehydrogenase. Yung fatty acyl-CoA dehydrogenase, they are chain length specific. Meaning to say, merong pang short chains, 6 carbon or less, may pang medium chain, 7 to 12, may pang long chain, 13 to 18. No? This will become important later as I will show you. So, paano natin yung ginagawa? So, you have here, halimbawa, meron tayong palmitoyl-CoA. Remember ha, kailangan may CoA. So, kung palmitate siya, anong gagawin natin? Yung palmitate, anong munang kailangan natin gawin? We need to activate it first. Ilang ATPs ang i-invest? 2. Pag palmitoyl-CoA na, itatransport natin siya via the carnitine shuttle from the cytosol to the mitochondria. Pag nasa mitochondria na, fatty acid oxidase. The first step is oxidation. So you will see here, this single bond, no? Yung single bond, this is the beta carbon. A single bond, we convert it to a double bond. Okay? We convert it to a double bond. In the process, we produce FADH. So, kung na-oxidize to, may na-re-reduce, magiging FADH. Next, we add water. So, double bond, we add water. And then, we oxidize again. So, this is the next step. Dito sa next step, no? We produce naman NADH. And then, kita mo yung color blue, gugupitin na natin siya to release acetyl-CoA. So, from 16 carbons, magiging 14 na lang. What's the next step? Ulit na naman. OHOT ulit. From 14, magiging 12. Tapos, OHOT ulit, magiging 10. Tapos, 8, and so on and so forth. Until we get how many molecules of acetyl-CoA? 8. So, to get 8 molecules of acetyl-CoA, we have to repeat it 7 times. So, therefore, ilang FADH yung mapoproduce? 7. Ilang NADH? 7 din. Kaya the reaction is palmitate, Palmitoyl-CoA will yield 8 molecules of acetyl-CoA, 7 molecules of FADH, 7 molecules of NADH. Anong gagawin natin kay FADH? Anong gagawin natin kay NADH? Dahil sila i-check ipapa-encash. So si FADH, saan pupunta? Sa electron transport chain. Kailangan ba natin ng shuttle? No. Bakit hindi? Kasi nasa mitochondria na tayo. Sa si FADH at si NADH, tatawid lang sila, nasa bangko na sila. FADH will enter complex 2. NADH will enter complex 1. For every molecule of FADH, how many ATPs do you get? 1.5. For every molecule of NADH, how many ATPs do you get? 2.5. Because the proton pump, protons are generated at complexes number 1, 3, and 4. And where do you produce ATP? Complex 5 via oxidative phosphorylation. So, lulusot si proton, ting! You've just produced ATP. Going back here, this is beta oxidation. Let's watch the video. So, you see here, okay, let me see. Okay. So, you have here acyl-CoA, that's palmitate. Okay. So, you see the reactions will be occurring here dun sa beta carbon. So, kung palmitoyl-CoA and 16 carbons, the first step is oxidation. So, you will see there, using a dehydrogenase. So, remember, dehydrogenase yung nagpo-produce ng FADH, NADH, magiging double bond. Okay. And then afterward, we add water, hydroxylation. Okay. And then afterward, we oxidize again. This time we produce NADH. And then finally, what happens? Thiolysis. Ibig sabihin, yan, yung acetyl-CoA gugupitin na natin. So that's beta oxidation. We repeat it 7 times. So if we compute the number of ATPs, so look at the diagram, If we compute the number of ATPs, so you see here, okay, from a fatty acid, we produce 8 acetyl-CoA. So 8 acetyl-CoA, pag nag-Krebs cycle, ilang ATPs bawat isa? 10. 3 NADH, 1 FADH, 1 GTP. So 10 times 8, 80. How about from FADH and NADH? Every NADH, 2.5. So 7 times 2.5, 17.5. Every FADH, 1.5 naman. 7 times 1.5, 10.5. So if you total, 108. Why do we need to subtract 2? We need to subtract 2 because to activate palmitoyl-CoA, we needed to use up 2 ATPs. Kaya 108 minus 2, 106. Compare. So, biruin nyo, ganun kadaming energy na kukuha natin. For every molecule of palmitate, we get 106 ATPs. Compare that with complete oxidation of glucose. If you completely oxidize glucose using the malate aspartate shuttle, how many do you get? 32. Using the glycerol phosphate shuttle, 30. So, ang laki ng difference, diba? This is the reason why for every gram of fat, you can get 9 calories. In contrast, for every gram of glucose, you only get 4 calories. Because of this, yung energy yield. So, yung beta oxidation na diniscuss natin, very useful yan kapag even-numbered yung fatty acids. But what about fatty acids with odd number of carbons? Yung fatty acid with odd number of carbons, may problem tayo doon. So for example, look at these 2 fatty acids. The fatty acid at the top has 10 carbons. So if you count, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Diba? Yung sa ibaba, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So problematic yan. Why? So let's see Bakit kaya siya problematic? So you see, yung fatty acid sa taas, if this undergoes beta oxidation, ilang beses natin siya gugupitin? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you cut it 4 times so that you can get 5 fatty acids. Diba? So you cut it 4 times so that you can get 5 acetyl-CoA molecules. In contrast, pag 11 carbons, look what will happen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Meron tayong 3 carbon compound. Hindi na natin yan gugupitin kasi pag ginupit natin, no, pag ginupit natin dito, kawawa naman siya, malo-lonely. So that's why if you have an odd number fatty acid with an odd number of carbons, we have this 3 carbon compound. So this 3 carbon compound is known as propionyl-CoA. Propionyl-CoA. So remember kapag when we beta oxidize fatty acids with an odd number of carbons, we end up with a 3 carbon compound known as propionyl-CoA. Why is propionyl-CoA important? No? So propionyl-CoA, you will see here, this is propionyl-CoA, 3 carbons. Propionyl-CoA is important because propionyl-CoA, just like glycerol, diba yung glycerol kanina, propionyl-CoA can be converted back to glucose. Okay? It can be converted back to glucose. Si acetyl-CoA ba pwede maging glucose? Yes or no? No, because once you convert pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, there's no turning back. Pero si propionyl-CoA pwede. So, during the fasting state, odd-numbered carbons, fatty acids, can serve as a source of glucose because of propionyl-CoA. You need to remember how. First, propionyl-CoA can be converted to methyl-malonyl-CoA. So look, propionyl-CoA to methyl-malonyl-CoA, the enzyme is propionyl-CoA carboxylase. O, dahil carboxylase, anong cofactor niya? Biotin. So using biotin as a cofactor, you can convert propionyl-CoA to methyl-malonyl-CoA. Afterward, from methyl-malonyl-CoA, we will convert this to succinyl-CoA using naman the enzyme methyl-malonyl-CoA mutase. So using the enzyme methyl-malonyl-CoA mutase, we will be able to convert methyl-malonyl-CoA to succinyl-CoA. So the cofactor is vitamin B12. So this time, the cofactor is vitamin B12. So propionyl-CoA to methyl-malonyl-CoA, methyl-malonyl-CoA to succinyl-CoA. Okay? And then succinyl-CoA, because this is already part of the Krebs cycle, this can now be converted back to glucose. A review. Where do you undergo beta oxidation? So you undergo beta oxidation in the mitochondria. But you have to remember, you can only beta oxidize in the mitochondria for for fatty acids with 18 carbons or less. With 18 carbons or less. Pag more than 18 carbons, which are your very long-chain fatty acids, you now have to bring them to a different organelle, which is your peroxisome. So these are your peroxisomes. So tatandaan nyo lang, pag sinabing peroxisomes, ang role nila, beta oxidation of very long-chain fatty acids. Tatandaan nyo ba kung saan natin ginawa yung very long-chain fatty acids? So remember, most fatty acids, you will synthesize them in the cytosol. But for very long-chain fatty acids, saan? Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Yung beta oxidation nila, special din sa peroxisomes. So, it's now here. So this table summarizes the differences between your lipogenesis and beta oxidation. So yung isa, pampataba, so from acetyl-CoA to palmitate. Yung isa naman, pampapayat, from palmitate, chop, back to acetyl-CoA. Subcellular location, remember, saan tayo nagpapataba? Sa cytosol. Saan tayo nagpapapayat? Sa mitochondria. Kasi sa mitochondria, mainit. What shuttle? Citrate, I8, pampataba. Carnitine, pampapayat, beta oxidation. What are the repetitive steps? Kapag fatty acid synthesis, code red. Kapag beta oxidation, OHOT. Where do you produce NADH and FADH? Of course, sa beta oxidation, no? Sa beta oxidation. But both you have to repeat 7 times. So sinong i-activate ni insulin? Insulin will activate fatty acid synthesis. Glucagon will activate beta oxidation. Okay, the rate-limiting step of fatty acid synthesis is acetyl-CoA carboxylase, which requires biotin. And then for beta oxidation, you have to remember, beta oxidation of very long-chain fatty acid occurs in the peroxisomes. Right? Peroxisomes. So next we will discuss the clinical correlates of fatty acid metabolism. We have your carnitine deficiency. So when we say carnitine deficiency, this happens when there's inadequate synthesis or loss of carnitine in the renal system. So sino yung mga may inadequate synthesis? For example, preterm infants. Okay? Or liver disease, kasi liver is important for protein synthesis. Those with malnutrition or strictly vegetarian diet, kasi wala silang proteins. Remember, carnitine is a protein. Excessive catabolism. So when you have severe infection, trauma, or burns, and then those undergoing hemodialysis naman, nawawala naman sila ng carnitine, no? Because you lose carnitine in the renal. Nadadialyze siya. It's a dialysable protein. Now, look here. Carnitine deficiency presents with hypoglycemia. Bakit ganun, no? So akala ko ba fatty acid metabolism, no? Fatty acid metabolism, bakit naman siya bakit siya hypoglycemia? So if you go back to this diagram, no? So recall, this is the diagram for the Cori cycle, di ba? So bakit important yung beta oxidation sa glucose metabolism? So review, to create glucose. No? So this is gluconeogenesis. Remember that gluconeogenesis relies on beta oxidation for energy. So, diba, lagi kong pinapaalala sa inyo, to create glucose, you need to spend energy. And where does that energy come from? It comes from beta oxidation. Kaya kung walang beta oxidation, wala tayong energy or ATP and GTP to sustain gluconeogenesis. Kaya tayo mag-hypoglycemia. Is that clear? So how do we treat carnitine deficiency? We supplement, no? So we add supplement. Similarly, if you have carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1 or 2 deficiency, wala naman yung enzyme. Ito hindi naman yung carnitine yung problem, yung enzyme. If you don't have carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1 or if it's deficient, so sa type 1, it will affect the liver. So you will have hypoglycemia. No, severe hypoglycemia, coma, and even death. No, very severe disease. Pag type 2, muscle naman yung affected. So type 1, liver, type 2 muscle. So this time, pag type 2, muscle lang yung affected, no? Ito, wala namang hypoglycemia, but you have cardiomyopathy, weakness after prolonged exercise. Medium chain fatty acyl-CoA dehydrogenase deficiency or MCAD deficiency. If you remember earlier, I told you, dun sa beta oxidation, yung first enzyme, yung fatty acyl-CoA dehydrogenase. Meron tayo for short chain, meron tayo for medium chain, meron tayo for long chain. Pag sinabi nating MCAD deficiency, yung enzyme for beta-oxidizing medium chain fatty acids, which are shown here on the monitor, on the screen, wala. No? So, pag wala yun, ano mangyayari? No? So, this is the most common inborn error of fatty acid oxidation. So, tandaan na, most common inborn error of fatty acid oxidation. How will it present? Sinasabi nila, this is the reason for sudden infant death syndrome. So, ano yung sudden infant death syndrome? Si mommy, papakainin niya si baby, no? Pakainin niya si baby. Pagkatapos, no? Ilalagay na niya sa crib. Pero pagkalagay niya sa crib the next day, patay na. No? That's sudden infant death syndrome. So, ano nangyayari? Yung pala si baby, remember, breast milk. Breast milk is rich in short and medium chain fatty acids. So, akala natin na feed natin siya, but in fact, overnight, no? Overnight, mag-hypoglycemia pala siya. Kasi hindi niya mabeta oxidize yung short and medium chain fatty acids. Okay? So, akala nila, oy, buti pa yung baby namin, tahimik lang matulog sa gabi. No? 8 hours na tutulog. That's not good. No, tandaan niyo yung baby, they feed every 2 to 3 hours. No? So, pag natulog yan ng 8 hours overnight, ibig sabihin hypoglycemic siya nun. Okay? So, ayaw natin yun. No? So treatment, so you avoid, so you give IV glucose and then you avoid fasting in these babies. Jamaican vomiting sickness. This is the ackee fruit. This is the ackee tree. So, you will see here, this is the ackee tree. Diba? So, if you eat the unripe fruit contains hypoglycine. Again, which blocks medium chain and short chain acyl-CoA dehydrogenase, inhibiting beta oxidation. Pag na-inhibit ng beta oxidation, what pathway is impaired? Gluconeogenesis. And if you don't have gluconeogenesis, you become hypoglycemic. Ref-Sum disease. So sa Ref-Sum disease, ito lang yung tatandaan nyo, this molecule. This molecule is known as phytanic acid. Now, phytanic acid normally undergoes alpha oxidation. It normally undergoes alpha oxidation. However, if you have refsum disease, you do not have phytanol-CoA hydroxylase. So, ang mangyayari, mag-accumulate ngayon si phytanic acid. And when phytanic acid accumulates, it blocks beta oxidation. So, when you block beta oxidation, sa refsum disease, ang presentation nito, retinitis pigmentosa. So, ang mnemonic ko dyan, retinitis pigmentosa. No? Dito nyo lang ito maririnig sa refsum, retinitis pigmentosa. Refsum disease, phytanic acid. No? Phytanic acid. So, anong treatment? You avoid food that contains phytanic acid. So, avoid dairy products and then ruminant fatty meat. So, hindi sila pwedeng baka. No? They cannot eat cow, beef. Zellweger syndrome. In Zellweger syndrome, so yung Zellweger syndrome, kasama nito yung adrenoleukodystrophy. So, tatandaan nyo si Zellweger syndrome and adrenoleukodystrophy. The problem in them will be your very long-chain fatty acids. So, your very long-chain fatty acids, saan natin sila i-beta oxidize? Sa peroxisomes. In Zellweger syndrome, you do not have peroxisomes. And because you do not have peroxisomes, the very long-chain fatty acids accumulate and most patients will die in the first year of life. No? Most patients will die in the first year of life. So, what will be the clinical presentation? No? So, the clinical presentation, tinatawag natin na cerebrohepatorenal syndrome. So, cerebrohepatorenal syndrome. So, see here, abnormal facial features. Kita niyo yung bright na yan, the white matter is full of very long-chain fatty acids. No? Tapos kulang ng gyri and sulci. So, they will have craniofacial dysmorphism, they will have liver failure. Okay? So, dahil wala silang peroxisomes. The other one is adrenoleukodystrophy. This is an X-linked disorder. They cannot transport very long-chain fatty acids across the peroxisomal membrane. So, this time, ang tatandaan nyo naman dito, adrenal failure. So, neurodegeneration with adrenal failure. Tapos, kapag tiningnan natin yung brain nila, maraming fatty acids. No? So, yan yung very long-chain fatty acids na nag-accumulate. No? So, diffuse myelin loss. No? So, diffuse myelin loss. So, adrenoleukodystrophy. So, anong treatment? Ang treatment dito, yung Lorenzo's oil. So, if you remember the movie, ito yun, no? So, Lorenzo's oil, it's a combination, no? Combination niya ng mga, it normalizes your very long-chain fatty acids. Yun yung special diet nila, no? This is diet that reduces endogenous synthesis of very long-chain fatty acids. Okay? So, remember, very long-chain fatty acids, dalawang isipin nyo dyan, Zellweger syndrome or adrenoleukodystrophy. Then finally, you have cystic fibrosis. Now, cystic fibrosis, this is because of a mutation, no? Mutation of the cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator gene, CFTR gene. So, usually there's a deletion of phenylalanine at codon 508. No? So, most of the time, so codon 508, nade-delete, no? Yung phenylalanine. So, anong nangyayari dito, no? So, your chloride channel, no? Yung CFTR protein, okay? It regulates chloride secretion. It regulates chloride secretion and sodium absorption. So, anong nangyayari? Yung mga secretions sila very thick because of mutations in this gene. At dahil very thick yung secretions sila, ano nangyayari ngayon? They have recurrent pneumonia. They have pancreatic insufficiency. No? So, kasi, di ba, yung pancreatic enzymes important. Failure to thrive. No? Pagdating naman nila sa pagtanda naman nila, no, they will have infertility. No, paulit-ulit sila na-admit. So, they actually have a very short lifespan, no, nung bago magkaroon ng treatment. And you diagnose them by the elevated chloride, sweat chloride, more than 60 millimoles per liter. So, you see here, no, ito yung representation, no, very thick. Ito yung normal, no, ito yung very thick. Ito yung sa cystic fibrosis. Okay? Paulit-ulit na sinusitis, maraming secretion sa lungs, liver, thick and blocked biliary duct. Intestines, no, they cannot absorb nutrients. No? They cannot absorb nutrients. Tapos infertile sila. So, kailangan, no, ang pinaka-important dito is you prevent, no? Prevent airway infection. You supplement their pancreatic enzymes, no? So, with treatment, no, I think may enzyme replacement So with active treatment, multidisciplinary care of these patients, they are actually able to live longer lives now. No, but before that, even in the United States, this is like a death sentence. They die young. The next topic will be your ketone bodies. No? So what are your ketone bodies? Let's explain. No? So, sabi natin, during the well-fed state, most of your nutrients will come from your carbohydrates, di ba? Your fuel source, the fuel source of your body, most tissues will prefer to use glucose. And then when you go on fasting, pag nag-fasting na tayo, ano nang gagamitin nating energy source? So, we will break down glycogen para maging glucose. And then, kung pwede rin tayong gumawa ng glucose using what pathway? Gluconeogenesis, di ba? At the same time, we can break down fat. So, yung triglyceride stores, yung bilbil mo, sasabihin mo, oras na. No? So, oras na. So, you break down triglycerides so that the fatty acids can become acetyl-CoA, and then the acetyl-CoA can enter the Krebs cycle. However, I also told you that not all organs can use fatty acids. Can you think of organs that cannot use fatty acids during the fasting state? Number one, your brain. No? Your brain hindi makakalusot sa blood-brain barrier. Wala rin silang triglyceride stores. And then number two, your red blood cells kasi wala silang mitochondria. No? So yung brain, no? So si red blood cell, kailangan talaga glucose ang gamitin niya. No? Si red blood cells kailangan talaga glucose ang gamitin niya. Pero si brain, kung wala na siyang makuhang glucose, hindi rin siya pwedeng gumamit ng fatty acids. It can use an alternate fuel source, especially during a prolonged fast. And that alternate fuel source, these are your ketone bodies. So when we discuss this, we will discuss two pathways, ketogenesis and ketolysis. So when we say ketogenesis, it's the synthesis of ketone bodies. And then ketolysis naman, yung breakdown naman ng ketone bodies. Although these are opposite pathways, both of them happen during the fasting state. Tatandaan ha, itong dalawang pathway na to, although opposite, both of them happen during the fasting state. So ketogenesis, creation of ketone bodies which serve as alternate fuel for peripheral tissues. So where does it occur? Sino kaya yung gumagawa ng ketone bodies? Kasi wala nang gamit na fuel si brain. Siyempre yung martyr, di ba? Si liver. And which part of the liver? The liver's mitochondria. The starting point is again acetyl-CoA. Kasi kailan ba tayo maraming acetyl-CoA? Kapag fasting. So during the fasting state, binibreakdown natin yung fatty acids. Not all of those fatty acids magiging acetyl-CoA sila. Hindi lahat ng acetyl-CoA papasok sa Krebs cycle. Some of them will be converted to ketone bodies to provide alternate fuel. There are three ketone bodies you need to remember: acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. Sa tatlong yon, yung acetoacetate tsaka beta-hydroxybutyrate lang yung pwedeng maging fuel. Yung acetone, pangtanggal lang yun ng nail polish. No. Kidding aside, yung acetone, we just exhale it. Acetone breath. Ini-exhale lang natin siya. Hindi natin siya nagagamit for energy. So you have to remember acetoacetate and beta-hydroxybutyrate. The rate-limiting step is the conversion of acetyl-CoA and acetyl-CoA to HMG-CoA. So synthesis of HMG-CoA. So HMG-CoA synthase. So remember this, ketogenesis, HMG-CoA synthase. So when we look at this diagram, we will see, anong sabi natin? During the fasting state, yung triglycerides, anong first step? Yung bilbil mo, hindi pa yan natin pwede gamitin for energy. Kailangan muna natin siyang gupitin. Sino yung gugupit sa kanya? Si hormone-sensitive lipase. Pag ginupit natin si triglyceride, what will we get? 1 molecule of glycerol and 3 molecules of fatty acids. Ano mangyayari kay glycerol? Tatapon na ba natin siya? No. Glycerol will undergo gluconeogenesis to become glucose. And then the 3 fatty acids, they will undergo beta oxidation to yield acetyl-CoA. If you combine acetyl-CoA and 1 acetyl-CoA, magiging acetoacetyl-CoA. Pag dinagdagan mo ng isa pa, yun na ngayon yung HMG-CoA. So HMG-CoA synthase, ito yung rate-limiting step of ketogenesis. And then from HMG-CoA, we will be able to create acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate or 3-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. As I've said as well, acetone is a metabolic dead end. We cannot use it for fuel. So, ganun lang. This is ketogenesis. Nasaan organ tayo? Sa liver. Nasaan part ng liver? Sa mitochondria. So, you see here, so during the fasting state, ito na yung integration. Si liver, it breaks down fats. Okay? The fats, palmitoyl-CoA will undergo beta oxidation to undergo para maging acetyl-CoA. Yung acetyl-CoA ni liver, hindi lang lahat yan papasok ng Krebs cycle. Some of the acetyl-CoA will be converted to ketone bodies. And these ketone bodies, the nice thing about them, they can travel in the blood. So they can travel in the blood without needing transporters. And then, they will go to tissues like the liver, like the brain. Sa brain, you will see they are converted back to acetyl-CoA. And when they're already acetyl-CoA, pwede na sila maging substrate for Krebs cycle. Okay? Kasi nga, look, si brain, bakit walang glucose? Kasi fasting. Bakit walang fatty acetyl-CoA? Kasi hindi siya nakaka-cross ng blood-brain barrier. Okay? Pero si ketone bodies, nakakalusot sa blood-brain barrier, yun ngayon yung magiging source natin ng acetyl-CoA for energy. Is that clear? So, itong part na to, ito yung ketogenesis. Itong part na to, ito naman yung ketolysis. Both of them happen during the fasting state. Take note, your ketone bodies are water-soluble. They can go to the urine, so ketonuria. Acetone you exhale in the lungs. So, ketolysis, ketone bodies are oxidized primarily in the mitochondria of extrahepatic tissue. So, sino yung pwedeng gumamit ng ketone bodies? Hindi lang si brain. So, aside from the brain, you can also use ketone bodies in muscle, kidneys, intestines. Memorize these organs, okay? Kasi pwede nilang tanongin yan. The following can use ketone bodies except. So, sino exception? Si liver. Remember, si liver, siya yung gumagawa ng ketone bodies. Pero, hindi niya kayang gumamit ng ketone bodies, no? Martyr talaga, no? Parang ito yung saying na si liver ang nagsaing, iba yung kumain, no? Siya yung gumagawa ng ketone bodies. Bakit hindi siya pwedeng gumamit ng ketone bodies? Because the liver does not have the thiophorase enzyme or the enzyme succinyl-CoA acetoacetate-CoA transferase. So you see, siya lang yung gagawa ng ketone bodies. Pag nagawa siya ng ketone bodies, it will be transported to organs like the muscle. And then, you see here, CoA transferase, wala siya nito. Kailangan kasi natin yan para may regenerate yung acetyl-CoA. So, remember the organs that can use ketone bodies and definitely, hindi siya kayang gamitin ni liver. Clinical correlates. Sometimes, there's excessive levels of ketone bodies. Sobra-sobra naman yung napoproduce natin ng ketone bodies. Ayaw natin noon. So, higher than normal levels of ketone bodies, we call that ketonemia pag nasa blood, ketonuria pag nasa urine. When does this happen? Kailan tayo nagkakaroon ng excessive ketosis? Number 1, prolonged starvation. Starvation, ketosis. Ano kaya yung hormonal profile nun? Tandaan nyo kapag ketosis, sobra-sobra yung glucagon. Tas walang insulin. So, kagaya ng prolonged fasting, di ba? Ang taas ng glucagon. Okay? Diabetic ketoacidosis. We will discuss this in detail when we go to metabolism. No? So, diabetic ketoacidosis, ang taas-taas din ng glucagon. Gawa tayo ng ketone bodies. Pero hindi naman natin nagagamit lahat. Tas wala tayong insulin. What happens? No? So, alcoholism, ganun din, no? Alcoholism. So, tandaan niyo yung tatlong yan. Starvation, diabetic ketoacidosis, alcoholism. This promote ketosis. So, if you remember, this is the Krebs cycle. Si acetyl-CoA, sino dapat ang sasalubong kay acetyl-CoA? Si oxaloacetate. Okay? Si oxaloacetate. Now, what happens during prolonged starvation? During prolonged starvation, si oxaloacetate, umaakyat yan papuntang gluconeogenesis. If you remember, pyruvate to oxaloacetate. Oxaloacetate to pep-carboxykinase. So, paakyat yan ng gluconeogenesis. So, during prolonged starvation, wala ngayon sasalubong kay acetyl-CoA. Ganun din kapag diabetic ketoacidosis. Pag diabetic ketoacidosis, no? Tsaka kapag alcoholism, okay? Ano nangyayari? Tumataas yung NADH. So pag tumaas yung NADH, yung oxaloacetate, babalik yan sa malate. Babalik sa malate. So yung acetyl-CoA, wala ngayon sasalubong sa kanya sa Krebs cycle. Saan siya pupunta? Pupunta na ngayon siya sa ketogenesis. Pupunta ngayon siya sa ketogenesis. So, diabetic ketoacidosis. So what happens in diabetic ketoacidosis? You have deficient insulin and very high glucagon. If you remember, ano ba nangyayari, no? Na the most common cause will be infection. So ano nangyayari? So you have hyperglycemia, ketonemia, and metabolic acidosis. Because of excessive glucagon, beta-oxidized tayo ng beta-oxidized. Remember, glucagon activates beta-oxidation. Yung palmitoyl-CoA, gagawa tayo ng gagawa ng maraming acetyl-CoA. Yung acetyl-CoA, yun yung substrate for ketogenesis. Tataas yung ketone bodies produced by the liver, and that causes ketoacidosis. So you will discuss this more in detail in internal medicine, no? So yung treatment, anong ginagawa? So you hydrate, okay? You replace potassium, no? So you see, no, ito yung clinical presentation niya, no? Okay? So most important, no, hindi insulin yung first treatment dyan. No? Hydrate first. Okay? So ito yung laging tinatanong sa biochem. The urine test for ketones, no? The urine test for ketones does not measure beta hydroxybutyrate. So mini-measure niya yung hindi niya na measure yung beta hydroxybutyrate, no? So yung urine test for ketones, hindi niya na measure yung beta hydroxybutyrate. Unfortunately, yun yung main metabolic product ng ketoacidosis. Okay? So minsan yung urine test for ketones negative, pero yung patient DKA talaga. The only reason is hindi siya nade-detect sa urine. Kaya ang mas maganda, i-directly measure mo yung beta hydroxybutyrate sa urine or sa serum rather than a dipstick test. So, in summary, fatty acids are synthesized in the liver after a carbohydrate-rich meal. So, it's not your fault. Sabi mo kay Bilbil mo, no? Yielding palmitate from acetyl-CoA. And then, yung acetyl-CoA ay yung palmitate, 16 carbons, unsaturated fatty acid, we store them as triglycerides by attaching 3 fatty acids to glycerol. Saan magagaling si glycerol? Sa glycolysis. The liver can also directly phosphorylate glycerol to glycerol kind phosphate. During fasting naman, hormone-sensitive lipase, remember yung gunting, degrades glycerol in the adipose tissue, the fatty acid. So yung glycerol pupuntang glyconeogenesis, yung fatty acids mag-undergo ng beta oxidation to yield acetyl-CoA, NADH, and FADH. Complete oxidation of fatty acids yields how many ATPs? 108 minus 2, 106. Finally, ketone bodies are synthesized by the liver to serve as alternate fuel during the fasting state. So remember the ketone bodies, acetoacetate, beta hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. Acetone is a metabolic dead end. Ketolysis and ketogenesis happen both during the fasting state. Sino yung mga organs na pwedeng mag-ketolysis? Sino yung pwedeng gumamit ng ketone bodies as fuel? Brain, muscle, brain, muscle, kidneys, and intestines. Definitely not the liver, because the liver doesn't have the thiophorase enzyme. If you have excessive ketone body formation, exceeding the use, no, then you have ketosis. So remember the conditions that promote ketosis. Starvation, diabetes, alcoholism. In this next topic, we will be discussing cholesterol, no? And here, I hope to convince you that not all cholesterol is bad. No? In fact, no, cholesterol is everywhere in your body. It's in your cell membrane. No? It's part of your cell membrane. And if you don't have enough cholesterol, no, kunyari hindi ka talaga kumain ng cholesterol, say mo 0 cholesterol in my diet, you will actually synthesize it. Kasi nga, kailangan natin siya. Okay? So, when you look at cholesterol, this is the molecule cholesterol. So, when you look at cholesterol, it has how many carbons? 27. No? Look at the structure, ha? Tinatanong nila to. No? You need to be very familiar. Kailangan sa isisip nyo, dapat, no, alam yung itsura ng cholesterol. Okay, it has 27 carbons. So you will see, this is what you call the steroid nucleus and the hydrocarbon tail. So ito yung hydrocarbon tail. So ito yung steroid nucleus. You will see meron siyang 4 rings, A, B, C, D. And the hydrocarbon tail, no? In the hydrocarbon tail. It has 8 carbons dun sa tail niya. So attached to carbon number 17. The hydroxyl group is at the A ring. There's a hydroxyl group. Yun lang yung may oxygen sa kanya, no? So that's why this is very non-polar. Very hydrophobic. No? Very hydrophobic. You have a hydroxyl group at ring A and then a double bond at ring B. Double bond at ring B. Ring D will contain the hydrocarbon tail. Please memorize this. How much cholesterol should you take? No? How much cholesterol should you take? So look here. Yan. So ideally, no more than 300 milligrams per day. If you have a history of heart disease, upper limit 200. But as I've said, if you eat 0 milligrams of cholesterol and you lack cholesterol, you will actually synthesize it. How do we synthesize cholesterol? So sa cholesterol synthesis, very similar siya sa fatty acid synthesis. Yung mga conditions that promote fatty acid synthesis, yun din yung magpo-promote ng cholesterol synthesis. So for example, the substrate, the starting point is also acetyl-CoA. What will also promote synthesis of cholesterol? Well-fed state. High insulin. Conversely, anong mag-i-inhibit sa kanya? Glucagon, cortisol, epinephrine, growth hormone. So where does it occur? No? It occurs virtually in all tissues. Kasi nga lahat ng tissues kailangan ng cholesterol sa cell membrane nila. Ang role ng cholesterol, no, it adds para maging mas rigid yung cell membrane natin. Which part? Cytosol and smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Di ba? Ano pa yung ginagawa natin sa smooth endoplasmic reticulum? Naalala nyo? Your unsaturated fatty acids, your triglycerides. So, tandaan nyo lang, basta complex na lipids na, smooth ER na yan. No? So, long-chain fatty acids, very long-chain fatty acids, triglycerides, tapos cholesterol. The rate-limiting step is HMG-CoA reductase. Kanina, HMG-CoA synthase. Ngayon naman, HMG-CoA reductase. Saan yung HMG-CoA synthase? Sa ketogenesis. So, look. So, acetyl-CoA, dagdagan natin ng isa pang CoA, acetyl-CoA, magiging magiging HMG-CoA na siya. Di ba? So, acetyl-CoA plus acetyl-CoA, acetyl-CoA. Dagdagan mo ng isa pa, HMG-CoA. So, ito yung pang-ketogenesis. Okay? So, itong acetyl-CoA, HMG-CoA, yan yung pang-ketogenesis. Sa cholesterol synthesis, sila nag-iiba. So, yung HMG-CoA, sa halip na gawin mong ketone bodies, i-convert natin siya to mevalonate. And this is the rate-limiting step. So, HMG-CoA to mevalonate catalyzed by HMG-CoA reductase. So, it's this step. Ito yung rate-limiting step of cholesterol synthesis. This is important because if you want to reduce cholesterol production in the body, this is the enzyme that you need to target using your statins. So, ulit, no? So, anong itsura no? So, HMG-CoA to mevalonate. Pag mevalonate na, the next step is, so when you look at mevalonate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Diba? So, we will convert it to a C5 isoprenoid. So, gagawin natin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, you see this? From 6 carbons, gagawin natin 5 carbons. Ang tawag dyan, isoprenyl pyrophosphate. So, isopentenyl pyrophosphate. No? So, this is an isoprene unit. So, this is a 5-carbon compound. So, yung 5-carbon compound na yun, gagawin nating 15. So, 5 plus 5, 10. Tapos, dagdagan mo ng isa pa, 15. So, yung 15-carbon compound, that's your farnesyl pyrophosphate. So, ulit, from mevalonate, gawin nating 5-carbon compound, that's your isoprene. Tatlong isoprene, magiging farnesyl. So, yung farnesyl pyrophosphate, 15 carbons. 15 carbons times 2. Doblehin natin sila. Pag dinoble natin yan, yung farnesyl pyrophosphate magiging squalene. So, this is now squalene, C30. And then, yung C30, pag ginawa na natin siyang ring, okay? ginawa na nating cyclic ring, yun na yung lanosterol. So, dapat yung tandaan si lanosterol because sa cholesterol synthesis, yun yung first cyclic compound. Okay? So, minsan tatanungin nila sa'yo yan. What is the first cyclic compound synthesized in the cholesterol pathway? The correct answer is lanosterol. And then from lanosterol, you have several more steps until you finally convert lanosterol to cholesterol. So, yun lang. Hindi nyo na kailangan aralin yung mga individual steps, no? So, bakit important yung cholesterol? So, you will see here, no? Cholesterol, we use it. From cholesterol, we synthesize bile salts. We create steroid hormones. It becomes part of our cell membrane. Again, rate-limiting step, HMG-CoA reductase, which converts HMG-CoA to mevalonate. From mevalonate, we create your isoprene unit, which contains how many carbons? 5. Yung 5 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 15, magiging farnesyl pyrophosphate. 15 carbons times 2, squalene, 630. Squalene, we form the first cyclic compound, lanosterol. And then lanosterol, we convert to cholesterol, which has 27 carbons. So, how do we regulate cholesterol synthesis? No? So, sabi ko sa inyo kanina, what will promote cholesterol synthesis? Cholesterol synthesis is promoted by insulin. Phosphorylated or dephosphorylated? Ano kaya yung mag-activate kay HMG-CoA reductase? So, HMG-CoA reductase, kailan mo siya i-activate? Well-fed or fasting? Kailan tayo magpapataba? No? Siyempre kapag well-fed. Diba? Siyempre kapag well-fed. Okay? So, kung well-fed, mataas yung activity ni HMG-CoA reductase. So, well-fed, walang phosphate. So, that's why dephosphorylation activates HMG-CoA reductase. Opposite naman yung effect ni glucagon, di ba? Glucagon will inhibit and then phosphorylation will inhibit HMG-CoA reductase. So, ano yung ibig sabihin ng SRBP? Yung sterol regulating element binding protein. Kapag mababa yung levels ng cholesterol natin, tumataas yung promoter ng transcription. No? So, you will learn this later. So, yung enzyme is HMG-CoA reductase. So, kapag mababa yung cholesterol, the SREBP levels, which promotes transcription of the enzyme, the rate-limiting enzyme, tumataas. Okay? In contrast, baliktad naman, pag mataas naman yung cholesterol levels natin, yung enzymes, okay, yung proteasomes na magdadigest kay HMG-CoA reductase, mas madami. So, bababa yung levels ng HMG-CoA reductase. So, statins are reversible competitive inhibitors of HMG-CoA reductase. O, balikan natin yung enzyme natin, enzyme kinetics. So, you will see here, ito si HMG-CoA. Kahawig niya si pravastatin, na si statin. Dahil magkahawig sila, statins can serve as competitive inhibitors. No? So, pwede nilang agawan si HMG-CoA doon sa active site. Okay? So, anong effect ng competitive inhibitors? What will happen to Km? Km increases. Okay? Competitive inhibitors will increase Km and decrease affinity. But Vmax is not changed. So, how do you overcome a competitive inhibitor? You just increase the level of the substrate. So, ganun yung effect nila. So, how do we degrade cholesterol? The cholesterol ring, we cannot degrade it. No, hindi natin kayang i-metabolize, hindi natin yung kayang i-break apart. Instead, we convert cholesterol to bile acids and bile salts and then excrete them in the feces. We can secrete cholesterol into bile, no? So, pwede natin yung transport natin yan sa intestines where bacteria can convert it to coprostanol or cholestanol. Ito yung tinatawag natin na enterohepatic recirculation. So, remember, look, your liver will synthesize cholesterol about 0.2 to 0.6 grams per day. Tapos, isi-secrete natin yung cholesterol with bile. It will be stored temporarily in the gallbladder and then transported, secreted into the second part of the duodenum. Some of it we excrete. So you will see less than 5% will be excreted with feces. No? But most of it will be recycled. The bile salts are reabsorbed and returned to the liver for recycling. So, yan yung pathway, no? Yan yung enterohepatic recirculation. 95% of cholesterol is actually reabsorbed. The reabsorption happens in the terminal ileum. Reabsorption happens in the terminal limb. So approximately, you produce about 500 milligrams of bile from cholesterol every day. So what happens in cholelithiasis? In cholelithiasis, so you see, no, yun yung cholesterol stones, no? In cholesterol stones, yung bile, hindi natin siya reabsorb from the intestines. So you will see the bile stones, the cholesterol stones can obstruct the common bile duct. Okay? Or, no, so pag na-obstruct niya yun, anong mangyayari? No? Mamamaga ngayon yung gallbladder natin. You'll have cholecystitis. Okay? You can even have pancreatitis as well kung pati yung pancreatic duct ma-obstruct mo. Okay? The treatment is cholecystectomy, bile duct exploration. Sometimes you can still take, no, chenodeoxycholic acid, no, to inhibit bile acid synthesis. But this is only useful pag hindi pa siya obstructive. Finally, Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome. What is Smith-Lemli-Opitz syndrome? SLO syndrome. Tandaan yung enzyme deficiency. There's deficiency in 7-dehydrocholesterol reductase. 7-dehydrocholesterol reductase is the final step in cholesterol synthesis. So, bakit important yun? Kung wala yung final step, hindi tayo makapag-synthesize ng cholesterol, correct? So, you will have low levels of plasma cholesterol and elevated levels of 7-dehydrocholesterol. Ayaw natin yun. So, this will be how they will present. You will see they have dysmorphic facial features, upturned nose, no? Multiple digits, no? So, polydactyly. Okay? They will have congenital heart anomalies, no? So, ang problem, no, multiple diseases, multiple organs are affected. Bakit? Kasi nga, cholesterol is used by almost all tissues. Okay? So, tatandaan nyo lang, no? Smith SLO, 7-dehydrocholesterol reductase deficiency. Finally, ito pala yung totoong finally, no? Congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Ito important topic din to, no? Not just for biochemistry but also for pediatrics. So please, you need to understand this topic very, very well. Pag sinabi natin na congenital adrenal hyperplasia, so congenital, inborn. Adrenal glands. Hyperplasia, lumalaki yung adrenals, no? Lumalaki yung adrenals. So remember, anong important role ng adrenal gland natin, ng adrenal medulla. Okay? Adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. Okay? So, yung adrenal gland, remember, your adrenal gland is important for glucocorticoid, mineralocorticoid, and sex steroid production. Okay? So, saan nanggagaling yung steroids? Yung steroid hormones, lahat sila galing kay cholesterol. So, lahat sila galing kay cholesterol. So, ano nangyayari? Pag sinabi natin na congenital adrenal hyperplasia, may problem tayo. Right? May problem tayo dun sa synthesis ng steroid hormone sa adrenal cortex. So, ano ba yung layers ng adrenal cortex? Glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis. GFR, salt, sugar, sex. Okay, the deeper you go, the sweeter it gets. Okay, so, tandaan nyo, no? Salt, sugar, sex. So, mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, sex hormones. So, ano nangyayari, no? So, you will see. So, for example here, okay, this is cholesterol. Yung cholesterol, from cholesterol, we are supposed to convert it to pregnenolone. So, the enzyme that converts cholesterol to pregnenolone is called desmolase. So, huwag niyong kalimutan yan, no? Cholesterol to pregnenolone, desmolase. So, pregnenolone is known as the mother hormone, pregnant. Kasi from pregnenolone, you will be able to create mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and sex hormones. The prototype mineralocorticoid is, of course, aldosterone. The prototype glucocorticoid is cortisol. And then you have your sex hormones. Sa sex hormones, you first produce androgens. So, androstenedione. And then using aromatase, the enzyme aromatase, you convert androgens to estrogens. Okay, again, important enzyme. Cholesterol to pregnenolone, desmolase. Androgen to estrogen, aromatase. So, look here. So, sa congenital adrenal hyperplasia, for example here, may enzyme deficiencies. So, dito sa diagram, wala tayong 21-hydroxylase. you will see, kapag wala tayong 21-hydroxylase, which is the most common form of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, hindi tayo makagawa ng aldosterone. So kung wala kang aldosterone, anong effect nun? If you do not have aldosterone, you will not be able to retain water. Okay? You will not be able to retain water kasi hindi tayo makapag-absorb ng sodium. And with sodium goes water. So you will become hypovolemic. Okay? Hypotension, hypovolemia. At the same time, wala din tayong cortisol. So ano bang role ni cortisol? Cortisol, remember, prevents hypoglycemia during stressful situations. So kung si glucagon prevents hypoglycemia during fasting, si cortisol prevents hypoglycemia during stressful situations. So hypovolemic ka na, hypoglycemic ka pa. Okay? So ano mangyayari? Dahil hindi tayo makaproduce ng aldosterone, mineralocorticoid, cortisol, glucocorticoid, lahat ngayon pupunta sa sex hormones. So you will see, you will have excessive sex hormone production. Paano siya nagli-lead sa adrenal hyperplasia? Because of negative, no? So anong nangyayari, no? So anong nangyayari dahil mababa, no? Yung mineralocorticoid, dahil mababa yung cortisol, it will tell the pituitary gland, uy, taasan mo yung ACTH kasi wala tayong cortisol, no? So kaya tataas ngayon yung ACTH from the anterior pituitary, lalaki ngayon yung adrenal glands. Okay, kaya siya adrenal hyperplasia. So you will see, no? So the most common is 21-hydroxylase deficiency. Kulang tayo ng mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid. Okay? Virilization, masculinization of external genitalia, yun yung presentation niya. Precocious puberty. Okay? Kakaiba naman siya kapag 11-hydroxylase. Ano pinagkaiba niya pag 11-hydroxylase? So we will see, ha? So sa 11-hydroxylase, okay, so okay? So you see here, pag 21-hydroxylase, yan yung block. Diba? So wala tayo nito, wala tayo nito. Pag 11-hydroxylase, nandito yung block. Ano pinagkaiba nun? Sa 11-hydroxylase, nakakaproduce na tayo ng deoxycorticosterone. Now, deoxycorticosterone already has mineralocorticoid effect. Meaning to say, you can already retain fluid. That's why, ang pinagkaiba ng 21-hydroxylase tsaka 11-hydroxylase, sa 11-hydroxylase, wala ng hypotension. In fact, you have hypertension. So, low renin hypertension. Pag narinig nyo yun, 11-hydroxylase yun. Okay? 11-hydroxylase yun. Okay? So, again, this is a table that summarizes. So, kapag mayroon tayong 21-hydroxylase, salt wasting, okay? Salt wasting, hypoglycemia, atypical genitalia. So you will see mababa yung cortisol tsaka aldosterone. Pero kapag 11-hydroxylase, mababa yung cortisol, aldosterone, pero no, you will see here, no, meron na tayong mineralocorticoid effect. So you will see here, hindi na siya hypotension, wala na tayong salt wasting. Finally, kapag 17-hydroxylase, ang affected lang dito yung mga sex hormones, no? Ang affected dito yung mga sex hormones. So, anong important yung tandaan, no? So, what you need to remember, okay, will be the clinical presentation. Okay, so, what do we do, no? Yung screening test, no? So, the screening test is usually your measurement of 17-hydroxyprogesterone. So, kasama to dun sa newborn screening, no? Kasama to dun sa newborn screening in which they look for 17-hydroxyprogesterone. To confirm the diagnosis, no, kunyari may positive siya dun sa newborn screening, then you proceed to the confirmatory test, no? The confirmatory test, so which is your cosintropin stimulation. Okay? So ito lang yung important. So just kailangan lang naiintindihan nyo alin 21-hydroxylase, ano yung 11-hydroxylase, and then 17-hydroxylase. Most common, 21-hydroxylase. How do we treat this? They replace the missing steroid hormone. So, kunyari, 21-hydroxylase, di ba? So, they will be on fludrocortisone supplementation to replace aldosterone. And, yung cortisol, papalitan natin yan, no? So, hydrocortisone or hydrocortisone, which is the exogenous form or other form of steroids. Okay? So, the last topic for lipids is lipid transport. So let me explain to you why this is important. So, kung naalala nyo, di ba, when we were discussing glucose, galactose, fructose, yung mga carbohydrates, we say that they just travel in the blood, di ba? So, pag kinain mo siya, pupunta siya sa liver, pupunta siya sa heart, pupunta siya sa brain. No, we don't talk about transporters. Ibig sabihin, glucose, no, kaya niyang mag-dissolve sa blood. Nandun lang siya sa blood natin on its own. Why is that? Because glucose is a polar molecule. It's a polar molecule, kaya niya mag-dissolve sa blood. However, pag magko-cross siya ng cell membrane, anong kailangan niya? Transporter, di ba? May mga GLUTs. Kasi hindi siya palulusutin naman ng cell membrane because the cell membrane is non-polar. Kaya kailangan natin ng transporter. Pero pagpasok sa loob sa cytosol, kailangan ba niyang transporter? Hindi na. Kasi nga, yung cytosol, polar environment na naman ulit. Okay? So, dun ngayon nagkaka-problem yung mga lipids. Because remember, your lipids, your fatty acids, your triglyceride, your cholesterol, they are non-polar. Takot sila sa tubig. No? Ayaw nilang naglalakad sa tubig. Pag nakakita yan ng tubig, ew, I will not walk on that. No? Ayan yan. So, hindi sila, ayaw nila yan. No? Ayaw nila maglakad sa baha. No? Hindi sila naglalakad sa baha. Which is why, if you have to transport lipids from one part of the body to another. So, for example, kumain ka. So, from the intestines, yung lipids na kinain mo para makapunta sila sa liver, kailangan nila ng transport molecules. Ang transport molecules na yun yung tinatawag natin na lipoproteins. So, the role of the lipoproteins is to transport our lipids from one tissue to another. Bakit siya tinawag na lipoprotein? No? So, ang structure nila, no, it consists of a neutral core. So, you will see here, no? Neutral core. So, yung loob niya, puro lipids. But the outer shell, no, will contain, no, proteins. So, terminologies. No? So, just some terminologies. The entire thing is called a lipoprotein. So, the entire thing is called a lipoprotein. Kapag yung proteins lang, ang tawag naman apoprotein or apolipoprotein. Again, the entire thing is called lipoprotein. If you're just referring to the protein, it's called apolipoprotein. So what's their function? They help keep lipids soluble in plasma. So in the blood, para makapag-travel yung mga lipids like your cholesterol, your triglycerides, nakasakay sila dyan. Para siyang taxi. Okay? Yung mga lipids, ang isipin nyo yan, taxi sila. Para maka-transfer ka from one organ to another, tatawag yung mga yan ng taxi. Sasakay sila. Tapos yung taxi, yun ngayon yung magta-travel sa blood. Okay? So you will see here, these are the important lipoproteins. So, ito yung sa lipid profile. No? Pag tinest nyo, so pag nagtitest kayo ng lipid profile, ito yung nire-request nyo, di ba? HDL, VLDL, IDL, no? So, triglycerides. No? Okay. Anong kailangan yung tandaan? The free fatty acids, no? Yung free fatty acids, mean kasi yung fatty acids sa mag-isa lang, hindi sila nakakabit kay triglycerides, no? They can be transported bound to albumin. So, nakakabit lang sila kay albumin. Okay? Para yung mga triglyceride, cholesterol, dapat sa lipoprotein na yan. Anong kailangan nyo tandaan sa table na to? You will see, no? Pag tinignan nyo to, ano ibig sabihin ng HDL, LDL, VLDL? High density lipoprotein. Low density lipoprotein. Very low density lipoprotein. Bakit may ganun? No? And then you will see, this compares the protein content and the lipid content. So let's take a look. Kunyari meron kang 1 kilong taba, tapos 1 kilong muscle, tinapon mo sila sa swimming pool. Sino yung lulutang? No, pag meron kang 1 kilong taba, 1 kilong muscle, pag tinapon mo sila sa swimming pool, yung 1 kilong taba, yun yung lulutang. Kasi mas mababa yung density niya. So you will see here, habang tumataas yung protein content, tumataas din yung density. That's why if I ask you, which lipoprotein has the highest protein content, it will be HDL. your high-density lipoprotein. Because the more protein there is, the higher the density. In contrast, sino naman yung pinakamababa yung density? Chylomicron. Why? Kasi siya yung pinakamataas yung lipid content. Habang tumataas yung lipids, bumababa yung density. Highest cholesterol content will be LDL. We will discuss this more later, pero tandaan nyo na lang muna. No? Pag LDL, high cholesterol yan. No? Kaya nga yan yung tinatawag natin na bad cholesterol. No? This is the bad cholesterol, your LDL. This is what you don't want. The good guy is HDL. So, the sources. So, we will learn this later. Saan sila nanggagaling? For now, tatandaan nyo, chylomicron comes from the intestine, while VLDL, LDL. So VLDL comes from the liver, and from VLDL you get IDL and LDL. So, aaralan na ano ba yung kwento ng mga taxi driver na to, no? So ito yan, no? So yung lipoproteins, ano ba yung ito yung kwentong taxi driver. So di ba pag meron tayong taxi, no? Kunyari sasakay ka ng taxi. Imagine niyo taxi. Okay? So first, bagong kain tayo. Ito yung scenario. Bagong kain ka. Pag bagong kain ka, look, majority of our dietary lipids, yung fat sa kinain natin are triglycerides. So, kumain tayo ng maraming triglycerides and then cholesterol. Ano mangyayari doon? Hindi sila magsistay sa liver. Okay? Yung triglycerides, hindi sila magsistay sa intestines. No. Hindi sila, pag kumain tayo, marami tayong triglycerides at cholesterol sa intestines. Hindi tayo magsistay doon. So, yung triglycerides at cholesterol sa kinain natin, kailangan nilang pumunta sa tissues, correct? So, kaya lang, pagdating sa intestines, nakita nila yung blood. Magta-travel ba sila sa blood para makapunta sa ibang organs? No. Ayaw nila yon. Ew. Ang gagawin nila, tatawag sila ng taxi. So, ang dadating na taxi, si chylomicron. So, you see here, sasakay sila kay chylomicron. So, si chylomicron, paano nila malalaman na, uy, chylomicron yan, dyan tayo sasakay. Di ba you look at the plate number? Di ba? Para malaman mo, uy, yun yung grab ko. Di ba? You look at the plate number. So, si chylomicron, ang plate number niya, B48. So, pag nakita nila yung apoprotein B48, tara, dyan tayo sasakay. Okay? So, B48, that's apoprotein for chylomicron. Sasakay na ngayon yung triglycerides at cholesterol. Kaya sinasabi natin, chylomicron begins in the intestines. Ang tinatransport niya, sino? Dietary lipids. Yung lipids that you got from the diet. So, nakasakay na sila. Pagsakay nila, yung taxi, babiyahin na. So, you will see the lipoprotein will now travel. Si taxi, manghihiram siya ng 2 susi from HDL. Sabi niya kay HDL, pahiram naman ako ng 2 susi. 2 susi yung ibibigay sa kanya. ApoC2 and ApoE. So remember, these come from HDL. ApoC2 and ApoE, and they will be useful later. So this one, you see, maraming yellow, maraming triglycerides, may konting cholesterol. 3 na yung hawak niya. Plate number, ApoB48. ApoC2 is there, ApoE is there. So pupunta na ngayon yung taxi sa peripheral tissues. Pagdating sa peripheral tissues like muscle or adipose tissue, kakatok siya. Alright, kakatok yung taxi driver. Sasabihin niya doon sa peripheral tissue, kailangan mo ba ng taba? No? Pag sinabi ni peripheral tissue, kailangan niya ng taba, anong gagawin niya? The peripheral tissue has this lipoprotein lipase. So just like hormone-sensitive lipase, anong gagawin ni lipoprotein lipase? Yung triglycerides, gugupitin niya yung fatty acids. No? So you will see here, the lipoprotein lipase cuts off the fatty acids from the triglycerides. Pero si lipoprotein lipase, meron siyang pang-activate. Ang pang-activate niya si ApoC2. Kaya tayo nang hiram ng ApoC2. Kasi si ApoC2, yun yung pang-activate natin kay lipoprotein lipase. And then, ginupit natin yung fatty acids. Marirelease ngayon si glycerol. Si glycerol babalik sa liver. Okay? Nakakuha na tayo ng taba. Anong gagawin ni taxi? Pupunta na siya sa next destination. Kunyari, punta naman siya sa muscle. Pagdating sa muscle, kakatok ulit siya. Kailangan mo ba ng taba? Pag sinabi ni muscle kailangan niya ng taba, yung fatty acids, gugupitin ulit niya using lipoprotein lipase, activated by ApoC2. Eventually, you will see yung taxi, halos wala na siyang laman na triglycerides, di ba? So, bumaba na yung mga cholesterol. Okay? So, ano ngayon ang mangyayari? This is what you call the chylomicron remnant. No? This is what you call the chylomicron remnant. And the chylomicron remnant, what will happen? The chylomicron remnant will go back to the liver. Okay? The chylomicron remnant will go back to the liver. Paano siya makakabalik doon? Using ApoE. No? Using ApoE. ApoE empty. Wala na siyang laman. ApoE empty. Para makapasok siya sa liver, kailangan niya ng susi. Okay? So, ganun lang. So, ito yung journey ulit ni chylomicron. Always remember, saan siya nagsisimula? Sa intestines. Sinong sakay niya? The dietary lipids, which are triglycerides and cholesterol esters. Pag sinabi natin cholesterol ester, that's cholesterol attached to one fatty acid. Okay, yung OH, yung hydroxyl group, pinapalitan ng fatty acid. And then, anong plate number niya? ApoB48. Hiram siya ng dalawang susi, punta sa peripheral tissue, activate lipoprotein lipase, bababa si fatty acid. Pag wala ng laman, garahin na siya sa liver. Yan ang kwento ni chylomicron. What about VLDL? Ito naman yung kwento ni VLDL. So if you remember, after natin kumain ng heavy meal, kumain tayo ng maraming carbohydrates, nag-buffet tayo. Si liver, marami ngayon siyang carbohydrates. Yung glucose, magiging pyruvate, pyruvate, magiging acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA, hindi na kailangan sa Krebs cycle. Saan pupunta? Sa fatty acid synthesis. So, kaya yung liver, after a heavy meal, marami siyang na-produce na fatty acids. Those fatty acids are converted to triglycerides. So, ito, no, hindi to dietary lipids. These are lipids you synthesized in the liver after a heavy meal. Ulit. So ito, yung mga triglycerides na to, hindi to galing sa diet. Ito, synthesize ni liver. No? Fatty acid synthesis in the liver. Si liver, dapat i-export niya yan. No? So gumawa siya ng mga triglycerides. Sabi niya, kailangan ko na kayong pamigay sa tissues. Kaya lang yung mga triglycerides, nakita nila, ay, blood, ew. Ayaw nilang dumaan sa blood. So, anong kailangan gawin, no? Tatawag sila ng taxi. Sino namang taxi yung tatawagin nila? Si ApoB100. So, si VLDL, no? Si VLDL. Paano natin malalaman na VLDL sila? Kasi yung plate number niya, ApoB100. So, you will see, ang plate number niya, unlike ApoB48, ApoB100. So, sasakay na ngayon yung mga triglycerides. Once again, yung taxi, manghihiram ng susi, ApoC2 and ApoE. And gano'n na ulit. So, yung taxi, pupunta siya sa peripheral tissues. Punta siya sa adipose tissue. Kailangan mo ba ng taba? Tatabihin ng adipose tissue. Kanino galing yan? Anong sasagot mo? Sasagot mo, galing kay liver. No? So, si liver yung nagpadala niyan. Hindi yan ang galing sa diet. No? So, pag sinabi niya, okay, kailangan ko ng taba. Once again, lipoprotein lipase, gugupitin. Okay? Eventually, mauubos yung triglycerides. So, you will see, habang nababawasan yung triglycerides, nagbabago yung pangalan niya. From VLDL, magiging IDL, hanggang maging LDL, low density lipoprotein. Okay? Kasi nga, habang nababawasan yung fats, tumataas yung density. Now, si LDL, pag wala na siyang laman na triglycerides, ano dapat gawin niya? Dapat na siyang bumalik sa liver. Paano siya makakabalik sa liver? ApoE. Okay? Using ApoE. Kaso, itong si LDL pasaway. Instead na bumalik sa liver, anong ginagawa niya? Minsan, nagde-deposit siya sa extrahepatic tissues. Such as carotid arteries or coronary arteries. Oxidized LDL is deposited in the subendothelium, leading to atherosclerosis. Kaya tayo nagkakaroon ng stroke, kaya tayo nagkakaroon ng myocardial infarction. Kaya LDL is the bad guy because the cholesterol is deposited in these extrahepatic tissues. Sa halip na bumalik siya sa liver, nadideposit siya doon. So once again, sa nagsisimula si VLDL, sa liver. Sino yung sakay niya? Triglyceride synthesized by the liver after a heavy meal. Saan siya pupunta? Sa peripheral tissues. Okay, pag wala na siyang laman, saan siya dapat bumalik? Sa liver. Pero si LDL, anong ginagawa? nagde-deposit sa extrahepatic tissues. Sinong good guy? Kung si LDL yung bad guy, ang good guy si HDL. So you will see here, this is HDL. Si HDL, nagsisimula yan sa peripheral tissues. Baligtad siya, no? So galing sa peripheral tissues, you will see paano mo nalaman na HDL siya. Kasi ang plate number niya, ApoA1. So A na, 1 pa, no? Good guy talaga. So HDL, what will it do? Yung cholesterol na na-deposit sa peripheral tissues, kukunin niya. So you will see, using LCAT, or sometimes known as PCAT, no? Acetylcholesterol acyltransferase, itatrap niya ngayon si cholesterol sa loob. So yung cholesterol na nandito, kukunin niya, tapos using LCAT, mako-convert to cholesterol ester para matrap niya. Tapos ibabalik niya sa liver. That is what we call reverse cholesterol transport. Kaya HDL is good. Ang gusto natin mataas yung HDL kasi mas maraming huhuli ng cholesterol para ibalik sa liver. Okay, so HDL, remember, the apoprotein is ApoA1. It transport cholesterol from the extrahepatic tissues back to the liver. So this is the summary of your lipoproteins. So from the intestines, sinong taxi doon? Si chylomicron. Sa liver, sinong taxi doon? Si VLDL. Anong plate number ni chylomicron? B48. Anong plate number ni VLDL? B100. Both of them will will transport triglycerides to the peripheral tissues where lipoprotein lipase, no, retrieves your fatty acids. Pag wala nang laman si chylomicron, babalik dapat sa liver. Pag wala nang laman si VLDL, LDL, babalik dapat sa liver. Pero sinong pasaway? Si LDL. LDL transports to extrahepatic tissues. Sinong good guy? Si HDL. HDL, ibabalik niya to liver yung mga nag-deposit sa extrahepatic tissue. This is just a summary of the apoproteins. So remember, no? ApoC2 and ApoE, hinihiram lang natin yan kay HDL. The role of ApoC2 activates lipoprotein lipase. Tandaan niyo Roman numeral 2, parang dalawang small letter L. So pag nakalimutan niyo para saan nga yan, lipoprotein lipase. ApoE empty. Pag wala nang laman, yan yung susi sa garahe. ApoA1, A na 1 pa, good guy, HDL. B48, B100, B48, chylomicron, B100, VLDL. Yun yung plate number. Clinical correlates, number 1, atherosclerosis. As I've said, no, cholesterol is deposited into the artery walls, especially from oxidized LDL, the bad guy. The oxidized LDL will cause damage and will predispose you to atherosclerosis. So you will see here, nagkakaroon ng plaque, cholesterol plaques. Ayaw natin yan because the vessel is completely occluded. That's how you get stroke or myocardial infarction. This is more severe in patients with diabetes, hypothyroidism, or lipid nephrosis. Ito yung mas important, yung hyperlipoproteinemias. So what happens in hyperlipoproteinemia? So in hyperlipoproteinemias, no, type 1, 2, 3, 4, no, ito yung mga dyslipidemias. You have excessive levels of lipids in your blood. Okay? So dapat yung tandaan. When you look at this table, clear dapat sa inyo. Sino yung nagsustroke, sino yung nag-MI, sino may atherosclerosis, sinong wala. Okay? Para mabilis. Si type 1, tatandaan nyo, wala yung atherosclerosis. Walang yung atherosclerosis. Ang may atherosclerosis, no? Okay? Pinaka-severe, type 2 and type 3. Si type 4, kaya siya sa matatandaan kasi associated siya with metabolic syndrome, no? So type 2 DM, no, coronary artery disease, obesity. So pag naisip niyo yung metabolic syndrome, type 4 yan. Okay? So ano ba yung problem sa type 1? Sa type 1, wala tayong lipoprotein lipase. So remember anong role ni lipoprotein lipase? Siya yung tagagupit ng fatty acid sa peripheral tissue. So kung wala tayong tagagupit, elevated yung triglycerides natin sa blood. Okay, you will have xanthomas, recurrent pancreatitis. So if you look here, no, this is familial lipoprotein lipase deficiency. So kita nyo, no, may fat, meron siyang skin lesions, no? So meron siyang yung mga puti-puti, fat globules yan. Tapos pag kinuha mo sila ng blood, no, look at that, no, merong fat sa serum. Ay, lipoprotein lipase deficiency to, no? So this is a 12-year-old with eruptive skin lesions in the hands, the buttocks, and extensor portion of the extremities. Ayun, tawag niya mga San Thomas. They have an increased risk of pancreatitis. So, type 1. Pag type 2, ito yung familial hypercholesterolemia. Sa type 2, ano mataas, no? So, mataas yung LDL nila, no? So, you will see, ito naman, no? Ito, cholesterol deposits, no? These are cholesterol deposits. San Thomas, Arcus, ang tawag dyan, Arcus. Look at that, no? Arcus. Okay? Around the eyes, antilasma. Ayaw natin yan kasi they will have elevated cholesterol, hypercholesterolemia. So, ang problem sa type 2, tsaka sa type 3, walang LDL receptor. So, pag type 2, walang LDL receptor. Pag type 3, walang ApoE. So, ang problem, hindi ngayon makagarahe si LDL sa liver. Dahil hindi sila makagarahe sa liver, magde-deposit na lang sila sa extrahepatic tissues, leading to high LDL and cholesterol, atherosclerosis, and coronary disease. So, kahit bata pa sila, 30 plus, mag-MI na yung mga yan. Okay? And then as I've said, type 4 associated with type 2 DM, elevated VLDL and cholesterol. Good guys. So, wait lang ha. So, let me see. So, lipoprotein A excess. No? So, lipoprotein A is parang LDL. So, kapag elevated lipoprotein A, atherosclerosis din yan kasi para siyang LDL. Ang okay, pinaka-okay, yung familial hyperalpha lipoproteinemia. Why? Kasi yung familial hyperalpha lipoproteinemia, anong mataas? HDL. And as I've said, HDL is protective against cardiovascular disease. Beta lipoproteinemia. Sa beta lipoproteinemia, wala tayong ApoB. So, imagine niyo ano mangyayari pag walang ApoB. Pag walang ApoB, edi walang ApoB48 at wala ring ApoB100. So, kung walang ApoB48, kung walang plate number, sinong hindi makakabiyahe? Si chylomicron. Hindi rin makakabiyahe si VLDL. Anong effect nun? So, yung mga pasahero ni chylomicron, masa-stranded. Ganon din yung mga pasahero ni ApoB100. So, saan sila masa-stranded? So, sa intestines, tsaka sa liver. That's why we'll see you will have accumulation of triglycerides in the liver and the intestines. And this is treated using vitamin E. No? Large doses of fat-soluble vitamins. No? Kasi nga hindi natin maka-absorb hindi sila ngayon, yung mga kinakain natin, hindi natin nagagamit. No? Kasi nasa-stuck sila sa intestines. Okay? Familial alpha lipoprotein deficiency, this is low or near absence of HDL. So kung wala kang HDL, talo ka nun. Kasi HDL sequesters your cholesterol back to the liver. So in summary, cholesterol is the major sterol in humans and it is synthesized by almost all tissues. So the rate limiting step is HMG-CoA reductase, which is the synthesis of the conversion of HMG-CoA to mevalonate. So remember the structure of cholesterol. Remember the uses of cholesterol. We use it to produce bile acids. We use it to produce steroid hormones. It is part of our cell membranes. Kaya pag hindi tayo kumain ng cholesterol, gagawa tayo. We cannot degrade cholesterol. So, 5% will be excreted in the feces. 95% will be recycled using enterohepatic recirculation. If you have enzyme deficiencies in steroid synthesis, that will lead to congenital adrenal hyperplasia. The most common is 21-hydroxylase, and you must be familiar with the symptoms, okay? And the hormonal profile. So 21-hydroxylase, 11-hydroxylase, 17-hydroxylase deficiency. Lipoproteins keep lipids soluble in plasma. So sila yung transporters. So remember, anong pinagkaiba ng chylomicron, VLDL, HDL, LDL. Remember as well that the higher the lipid content, the lower the density. The higher the protein content, the higher the density. In hyperlipoproteinemias, elevated levels of triglycerides, LDL, and cholesterol cause cardiovascular disease even in young individuals. All right? Thank you.